The line between enemy and friend blurs when mercy stands in the balance. In the harsh Arizona territory of 1878, one woman's act of compassion toward a dying stranger would challenge everything she knew about courage, loyalty, and the unwritten boundaries between worlds. Her choice, made in a single moment, would echo through generations. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The dust storm came without warning, as they often did in the northern Arizona territory. Catherine Wells pressed her shoulder against the cabin door, forcing it shut against the howling wind. 6 years living on the frontier had taught her the language of storms, how to read the copper sky, how to prepare for the assault of sand and debris that could strip paint from wood and hope from the hardiest settler. But this storm felt different, more persistent, angrier. Catherine moved to the window, wiping a clear spot on the glass with her sleeve. Outside, her small garden plot disappeared beneath swirling clouds of red dust. The young cottonwood she'd planted 3 summers ago bent, nearly double, its leaves thrashing against the onslaught. 6 years of stubborn determination had transformed this patch of wilderness into something resembling a home. 6 years since she'd left Boston with her medical bag, her books, and dreams of bringing modern medicine to those who needed it most. 6 years since the war had taken her husband Thomas, leaving her with nothing but his memory and a determination to make his sacrifice matter. The cabin creaked and groaned under the storm's assault. Catherine moved methodically through her evening routine, checking supplies, organizing her medical instruments by candlelight. The army surgeon at Fort Whipple had once called her the most prepared woman in the territory, though his tone suggested this wasn't entirely a compliment. She'd stopped caring about compliments the day she'd buried Thomas. As darkness fell, the wind shifted, bringing with it the unmistakable sound of hoofbeats. Catherine froze, her hand moving instinctively to the rifle propped beside the door. Visitors during a dust storm meant trouble. Desperate travelers, lost soldiers, or worse. The territorial papers had been full of stories about raiding parties and escalating tensions with the Apache. Just last month, the Miller family 15 miles south had been found dead, their homestead burned to the ground. A single sharp knock rattled her door. Then silence. Catherine lifted the rifle, approaching cautiously. "Who's there?" she called, voice steady, despite the quickening of her pulse. No response came, except the wind's howl and another knock, weaker this time. She hesitated, calculating. Risk against conscience. In 6 years of frontier life, she'd learned that caution kept you alive, but isolation hollowed you from the inside. "I'm armed," she warned, then slowly lifted the bar and cracked open the door. The sight that greeted her was not what she expected. An elderly Apache man slumped against her porch post, one hand pressed to his side, the other gripping a wooden staff for support. His face was gaunt with hunger, his buckskins torn and weathered. Despite his obvious weakness, his eyes held a dignity that made Catherine pause. The rifle remained in her hands, but her medical training had already begun its assessment. Severe malnutrition, possible infection, dehydration. Without intervention, this man would not survive the night. "You need help?" she said, unsure if he understood English. The old man's eyes met hers. "Medicine woman," he replied in accented but clear English. "They speak of you at the fort." Catherine's surprise must have shown on her face. The old man attempted something like a smile, though pain twisted it into a grimace. "I am called Swift. Fox, I have traveled far to find the woman who heals without asking who stands before her." A moment stretched between them, heavy with choice, with consequence. Everything she'd been taught by settlers and soldiers warned her to close the door, to protect herself from the Apache menace the newspapers described. But everything she'd learned as a doctor, as a human being who had seen too much death already, pulled her in the opposite direction. "Come inside," she said finally, lowering the rifle but not setting it aside. "The storm grows worse." He nodded once, gathering what strength remained to cross her threshold. Inside, the lamplight revealed the full extent of his condition. Beneath the dust and travel wear, his frame was skeletal, cheeks hollow from hunger. He moved with the careful deliberation of someone accustomed to hiding pain. "Sit," Catherine instructed, pointing to the chair nearest her small stove. "Let me look at you." As he eased himself down, she noted how his gaze swept the cabin, taking in the medical texts stacked beside her rocking chair, the bottles of tinctures and herbs, arranged on shelves, the surgical instruments laid out on her work table. His assessment was as methodical as hers had been of him. "Your people and mine," he said finally. "They are not friends." Catherine placed her rifle in the corner, though still within reach. She filled a cup with water and offered it to him. "Drink, slowly. Too much at once will make you sick." "You did not answer," he observed, taking the cup with hands that trembled slightly. "My people," she replied, turning to gather supplies, "are those who need healing. Now, tell me when you last ate." The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but acknowledgement of her evasion. 2 days, before that little." She nodded, unsurprised, and set about preparing a thin broth. Years of frontier medicine had taught her how to treat the starving. Too much food too quickly could kill as surely as no food at all. As she worked, she continued her assessment, noting the way he held himself, the subtle signs of pain he tried to mask. "You're injured," she stated. "Not a question." Swift Fox sipped the water carefully. "An old wound. It opened again during my journey. I'll need to see it." He studied her face, searching for something. Trust, perhaps, or deception. "Why would you help me, Catherine Wells? Your kind fear mine." The use of her name startled her. "How do you know who I am?" "We know much about the settlements. The woman doctor who lives alone. The one who leaves water by the trail crossing for travelers, who treats Mexicans and prospectors that the fort doctors turn away." His eyes held hers steadily. "We watch, we learn, we remember both kindness and cruelty." Catherine absorbed this information, unsettled by how visible her life had been to unseen eyes. She'd left those water jugs and supplies thinking her small mercies went unnoticed. The realization that they'd been observed, tallied, remembered, it shifted something in her understanding of the land she'd called home for 6 years. "I help you because you need helping," she said finally, the simplicity of the truth settling between them. "And because I took an oath before I came west. Now let me see your wound." After a moment's hesitation, Swift Fox moved his hand from his side. The buckskin shirt was stiff with dried blood, fresh crimson still seeping through in places. Catherine's trained eye immediately recognized a knife wound, deep but not immediately life-threatening, unless infection had set in. She worked in silence for a while, cleaning the wound with whiskey that made him hiss between clenched teeth, though he didn't flinch. The cut was long but clean, suggesting a blade rather than an arrow or bullet. It had been crudely stitched once before, but had torn open during his travels. "Who did this to you?" she asked, threading a needle with catgut. "Men who see only Apache, not a man." His voice remained even despite the pain as she began to stitch. "I was returning from the trading post when they came, 3 of them, with knives and hatred." Catherine's hands stayed steady, though anger flared at the implication. "Settlers? My prospectors, drunk, looking for someone to blame for their empty pockets." He watched her work with interest. "Your stitches are small, even." "I trained at Massachusetts General Hospital before the war," she replied, focusing on the neat row of sutures. Though my professors would be surprised to see where I'm practicing now. War changes paths, Swift Fox observed, for all people. The simple statement hung in the air between them, bridging experiences she wouldn't have thought they shared. Catherine finished the stitching and applied a poultice of yarrow and comfrey to help with healing. As she worked, the storm outside intensified, rattling the windows and howling like a living creature. "You should eat now," she said, helping him into a clean shirt she kept for Patience. It hung loose on his frame, but would serve until his own could be washed. Just a little, slowly. The broth was simple, rabbit stock with a few root vegetables, but Swift Fox ate it with the deliberate appreciation of someone who understood hunger intimately. Between careful spoonfuls, he studied her face. "You have known hunger too," he said unexpectedly. Catherine paused in her cleaning of instruments. "The war," she acknowledged. "The hospital where I worked was in Confederate territory by the end. Supplies became scarce." She didn't elaborate on those final months, the hollow-eyed soldiers, the amputations performed without anesthesia, the gradual withering of hope as medicines ran out and infections claimed more lives than bullets. Some memories were best kept locked away. "Yet you came west," he observed. "Many go east, seeking easier lives." "I came because I was needed," she replied, the well-worn explanation feeling insufficient even to her own ears. The truth was more complicated. Grief had driven her as much as purpose. Thomas had died believing in a future where the country's wounds would heal. She'd come west partly to find that future, partly to outrun his ghost. Swift Fox seemed to hear what she didn't say. "Loss follows us like shadows. We decide whether to walk with it or let it consume us." The insight, delivered without sentiment, caught her off guard. There was something in his manner that reminded her of the old hospital director in Boston, a quiet authority born from having seen too much, of life's harshness without becoming harsh himself. "Are you a healer among your people?" she asked, curious now. He shook his head slightly. "I am a storyteller, one who remembers the old ways, the treaties made and broken, the movements of stars and seasons. In your world, perhaps a historian." Catherine's interest deepened. Her medical texts and scientific journals were her most valued possessions, but she'd always been drawn to history as well, the stories that shaped nations and individuals alike. "Then we're not so different," she ventured. "We both keep knowledge, alive, different rivers flowing to the same ocean." His expression softened slightly. "Though your people often forget that the rivers were flowing long before they arrived to name them." The gentle rebuke wasn't lost on her. Catherine had encountered enough arrogance among settlers and soldiers to recognize the truth in his words. The same military officers who dismissed Apache superstition thought nothing of bloodletting and mercury treatments that she knew caused more harm than healing. Outside, the wind abruptly died, leaving a silence so complete it seemed to ring. In her ears, the storm was passing, moving on to scour some other patch of desert clean. "You should rest," Catherine said, noticing how Swift Fox's eyelids had grown heavy, despite his efforts to remain alert. "I've made a pallet near the stove. It will be warm there." He regarded her with that searching look again. "You show great trust, allowing a stranger to sleep in your home, or perhaps great practicality," she countered with a tired smile. "You're in no condition to cause trouble, and I've set enough broken bones and bullet wounds to know a dozen ways to incapacitate a man if needed." This time, Swift Fox did smile, the expression transforming his weathered face. "You would have made a formidable warrior, Catherine Wells." "I'll settle for being a decent doctor," she replied, helping him to the pallet she'd prepared. "Now rest. Morning will bring enough challenges without adding exhaustion to them." As Swift Fox settled onto the blankets, Catherine moved to her rocking chair, medical journal in hand, but rifle still within reach. Trust had limits, especially on the frontier. She would read through the night, watching over her unexpected patient. as she'd done countless times before with others who had arrived at her door in need. But as the hours passed and the old man's breathing steadied into sleep, Catherine found herself watching him instead of her pages. There was something about his presence that transformed her small cabin, making it feel less like the isolated outpost it had been for years, and more like the place of healing she'd originally envisioned. Outside, the night settled into stillness. No more wind, no more swirling dust, just the vast Arizona sky studded with stars that seemed close enough to touch. In the morning, she knew, riders from the fort might pass by. Questions would be asked about tracks leading to her door. Explanations would be demanded, but those concerns belonged to tomorrow. Tonight, in this moment of unexpected peace, Catherine allowed herself to feel something she hadn't experienced in a very long time. The simple satisfaction of having done what was right, regardless of consequence, of having chosen compassion over fear, healing over division. She couldn't know then that this single choice, to open her door during a dust storm, to treat a wounded elder, would set in motion events that would transform not just her life, but the fragile relationship between two peoples, balanced on the knife edge of conflict. She couldn't know that 3 days later, her small homestead would become the focus of a gathering that would be remembered in stories passed down through generations on both sides of a divide she'd begun to bridge. Catherine simply knew that she had done what she'd been trained to do: tend the wounded, comfort the suffering, preserve life where possible. The rest would unfold as it would, one moment, one choice at a time. As dawn approached, painting the eastern sky with bands of gold and crimson, Swift Fox stirred on his pallet. His eyes opened, immediately alert despite his weakened state. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Your garden will need attention after the storm," he observed quietly. "The young plants are strong but bent low." Catherine glanced toward the window, surprised by the direction of his thoughts. "Yes, I suppose they will. Life bends, but does not break if the roots are strong," he continued, slowly sitting up. "My people have a saying, after the strongest wind comes the sweetest water." She considered this, understanding he wasn't just speaking of her garden. "Is that why you risked coming here, seeking sweet water after the wind?" Swift Fox regarded her thoughtfully. "I came seeking the healer who might become a bridge. There are others, children, elders, who suffer while fort doctors turn them away. My grandson said it could not be true, that no white woman would help our people. I came to see with my own eyes." The simple explanation stunned Catherine with its implications. "You risked your life on a rumor about me?" "I risked a life already heavy with years to find the truth," he corrected gently. "And found it when you opened your door." Before she could respond, the distant sound of hoofbeats reached them, multiple riders approaching from the direction of the fort. Catherine moved to the window, her stomach tightening with apprehension. Through the early morning light, she could make out 3 uniformed men on patrol. "Army scouts," she said, turning back to Swift Fox. "They'll have seen tracks leading here." The old man nodded calmly, as if he'd expected this. "What will you tell them, Catherine Wells?" She didn't hesitate. "The truth. That I treated a patient who arrived during the storm, and if they demand you surrender me—" Catherine straightened, decision already made. "My cabin is a place of healing. That doesn't change based on who needs the healing." Something like approval flickered in Swift Fox's eyes. "Then we will face this storm together as well." As the riders drew closer, Catherine moved to put coffee on the stove and straighten her appearance. Whatever came next, she would meet it as she had met every challenge since coming west, with her head high, her purpose clear, and her commitment to healing unshaken. What she could not know as she prepared to defend her choices to men who might not understand them, was that Swift Fox was not merely an elder, but a revered spiritual leader among his people. That his grandsons were even now riding toward a meeting place where 70 warriors awaited news of his fate. That her simple act of compassion would soon be tested in ways that would redefine courage, loyalty, and the possibility of understanding, between worlds long divided by fear and bloodshed. The morning sun climbed higher, illuminating her small garden where, just as Swift Fox had observed, young plants bent by the storm were already beginning to straighten toward the light. The three riders approached Catherine's cabin with the practiced caution of men who'd spent too many years in hostile territory. Leading them was Lieutenant James Harmon, a career soldier whose face had been weathered into permanent lines of suspicion by 15 years on the frontier. Behind him rode Corporal Miller and Private Thompson, hands casually near their holstered weapons. Catherine stepped onto her porch, closing the cabin door behind her. She left Swift Fox inside with clear instructions to rest and remain calm, though the old man had seemed remarkably untroubled by the approaching soldiers. "Morning, Mrs. Wells," Lieutenant Harmon called, touching the brim of his hat. His tone was polite, but his eyes scanned the property, noting the 2 sets of tracks leading to her door. "Quite a storm last night, Lieutenant," she replied with a nod. "What brings the army to my doorstep so early?" Harmon dismounted, handing his reins to Private Thompson. "Routine patrol, checking on outlying homesteads after the storm." He paused, gesturing toward the tracks. "Seems you had a visitor." "A patient," Catherine corrected firmly. "An elderly man caught in the storm. I treated him." The lieutenant's expression hardened slightly. "Apache tracks, Mrs. Wells. Unmistakable. You're harboring an Indian?" "I'm treating a wounded human being," she replied, meeting his gaze directly. "As I would treat you or your men if needed." Corporal Miller spat into the dust. "Begging your pardon, ma'am, but you can't trust these savages. Same ones killed the Miller family just last month." "Different band entirely," came a calm voice. Behind Catherine, Swift Fox stood in the doorway, leaning on his walking stick, but somehow managing to project dignity despite his weakened state. "Black Knife's warriors were responsible for that attack. My people have kept the peace." Lieutenant Harmon's hand moved to his sidearm. "You're a long way from the reservation, old man." "I have permission to travel for medicinal plants," Swift Fox replied, producing a crumpled paper from inside his shirt. "Signed by Agent Burton at San Carlos." Catherine watched the lieutenant's face as he examined the document, his expression shifting between suspicion and reluctant acknowledgement. The paper was genuine, a rarity in itself, as most Apache were denied travel permits regardless of reason. "This is dated 3 weeks ago," Harmon said finally. "You've been wandering a long time for herbs. The best medicine grows where it chooses, not where men find it convenient," Swift Fox answered, his stance steady despite the effort Catherine could see it cost him. "The storm delayed my return." A tense silence stretched between them. Catherine was acutely aware of the precarious balance. The lieutenant's authority, Swift Fox's vulnerability, her own position caught between worlds. One wrong word could tip the situation from tense to dangerous. "He's under my care, Lieutenant," she said firmly. "Too weak to travel today. I'll take responsibility for him." Harmon studied her face, then Swift Fox's, calculation evident in his eyes. "You understand what you're doing, Mrs. Wells. Harboring an Apache, even with papers, it won't sit well with folks around here." "I understand my duty as a doctor," she replied. "The same duty that had me digging buckshot out of Sergeant Lewis's shoulder last winter when no one else would. Touch him." The reminder of her service to the military, saving a well-liked sergeant after a barroom brawl had turned ugly, shifted something in Harmon's demeanor. He wasn't a cruel man, just one shaped by years of violence and uneasy peace, of treaties made and broken on both sides. "One day," he conceded finally. He has 1 day to recover, then he heads back to San Carlos, and I'll be posting a man to keep watch, for your protection. The implication that she needed protection from her patient rather than hostile settlers rankled, but Catherine recognized the compromise for what it was. "Thank you, Lieutenant." Harmon turned to his men. "Thompson, you'll take your first watch. Miller and I will continue patrol and relieve you this evening." The young private dismounted, looking none too pleased with his assignment, but nodding obediently. Harmon leaned closer to Catherine, lowering his voice. "The Reeves brothers have been drinking in town for 2 days, talking about Apache hunting. Be careful who else comes calling." With that cryptic warning, he remounted and led Corporal Miller away, leaving Private Thompson to establish himself beneath the cottonwood with a clear view of both the cabin and the surrounding approach. Catherine turned to find Swift Fox watching the departing soldiers with an unreadable expression. "You should be resting," she admonished, medical concern overriding the political tension of the moment. "The young one they left," Swift Fox observed quietly as they returned inside. "He has fear in his eyes. Private Thompson, he's new to the territory. This is probably his first close encounter with an Apache." Swift Fox eased himself back onto the pallet by the stove. "Not his first, but perhaps his first without rifles between us." He settled against the blankets with a suppressed grimace. "You stood your ground well, Catherine Wells." "I've had practice," she replied, checking his wound for signs of renewed bleeding. "The army respects clear boundaries and direct speech, as do my people. Though we have learned that even the clearest words can be forgotten when gold or land is discovered." The bitter truth in his statement hung between them. Catherine had seen enough broken promises during her years on the frontier to know he spoke from experience. The wounds of betrayal ran deeper than any knife could reach. "You should eat something more substantial," she said, turning the conversation to immediate needs. "Your body needs strength to heal." She prepared a simple meal of cornbread and beans, watching as Swift Fox ate with deliberate care, each bite measured, each movement precise despite his weakness. There was a ceremonial quality to his actions that spoke of a lifetime of mindfulness. "You mentioned your grandsons," Catherine said, as she worked on grinding herbs for a fever powder. "They must be worried about you." Something like amusement flickered across Swift Fox's features. "They know I am stubborn, hard to kill." His expression softened slightly. "But yes, they will be concerned. Wolf-caller and running deer, both warriors now, though I remember when they were boys playing with stick horses." The unexpected glimpse into his family life humanized him further. Not just an Apache elder, but a grandfather who watched children grow, who carried memories of their childhood games. Catherine thought of the newspaper headlines that reduced his entire people to marauding savages, and felt a familiar anger at the simplification of complex lives. "Tell me about them," she encouraged, partly from genuine interest and partly knowing that talking would help distract him from pain. Swift Fox settled more comfortably, his dark eyes distant with memory. "Wolf-caller has the gift of horses. Animals trust him, even the wildest Mustang. His mother, my daughter, had the same gift before the fever took her." He paused, the brief shadow of old grief passing across his face. "Running deer carries my stories. When I speak the old ways, the treaties, the movements of stars, he remembers every word. In your schools, he would be the one with books always in hand." Catherine smiled at the image. "I was that child, always reading when I should have been doing chores." "The hunger for knowing is a powerful spirit," Swift Fox agreed. "It led you west, yes? To learn what cannot be found in Eastern books?" The observation was uncomfortably perceptive. Catherine had indeed come west, partly driven by that hunger, to practice medicine beyond the constraints of Boston society, to test herself against realities her professors had never encountered. Partly, she acknowledged, though necessity played its role as well. Swift Fox nodded, understanding what she didn't say. The best learning comes from necessity. Your schools teach medicine from books. Our healers learn from watching the deer eat certain plants when wounded, from seeing how the bear uses mud for insect stings. Catherine's interest sharpened. Her medical training had been formal, rigorous, but she'd adapted it considerably during her years on the frontier, incorporating treatments she'd observed among Mexican curanderas and local settlers. "I'd like to learn more about your healing methods," she said. "I've found that medicine can benefit from many traditions." Swift Fox studied her face, perhaps gauging her sincerity. "Many white doctors mock our ways." "I'm not interested in mockery," Catherine replied, "only in what works. I've seen too many patients die under approved treatments to believe any medical tradition has all the answers." Something in her earnestness must have convinced him, for Swift Fox began to speak about Apache healing practices, the use of certain roots for infection, barks for pain, the importance of treating spirit alongside the body. Catherine listened, intently, mental notes forming about plants she recognized and others she'd need to investigate. Their conversation continued through the afternoon, interrupted occasionally when Catherine checked on Private Thompson, bringing him water and something to eat. The young soldier remained vigilant but increasingly uncomfortable as the Arizona sun beat down on his position. "He will sleep soon," Swift Fox observed after Catherine's third visit to Thompson. "The heat makes heavy eyelids." She glanced out the window to see the private indeed fighting drowsiness, his posture less alert than before. "Don't get any ideas about leaving," she warned. "You're still too weak, and there are others besides the army who might be watching." Swift Fox's expression grew somber. "The Reeves brothers. I know of them. 3 men, cattle ranchers with a hatred that burns hot. They attacked 2 Apache women gathering acorns last spring." "The lieutenant said they've been in town," Catherine confirmed, concern deepening. "Drinking and talking about Apache hunting." "Then we both have reason for caution." Swift Fox shifted, grimacing as the movement pulled at his stitches. "This territory grows more dangerous as more white settlers arrive. Land that once fed my people now holds cattle that drink the streams dry." Catherine couldn't dispute his assessment. She'd treated enough victims on both sides to know that resources were growing scarcer: water, grazing land, game animals, while populations increased. The equation was simple and devastating. "There are good people among the settlers," she offered, though the defense sounded hollow even to her ears. "Those who want peace." "Peace requires justice," Swift Fox replied without rancor. "Your government makes treaties, then breaks them when gold is found or farmers want land. How can there be peace built on shifting sand?" The question hung between them, unanswerable in its stark truth. Catherine turned to check his wound again, unwrapping the bandages to reveal stitches that held firm. No signs of infection. A minor miracle given the circumstances. "You have healing hands," Swift Fox observed, "strong but gentle." "Years of practice," she replied, preparing a fresh poultice. "Though I wish they'd had less opportunity for improvement. This territory has provided no shortage of wounds to tend." "Your hands remember," he said, watching her work. "Mine remember. Too, the feel of rains in youth, the weight of my grandchildren as babies, the texture of sacred objects passed through generations." He flexed his fingers slowly, old now, but still carrying memory. Catherine understood the sentiment in ways she couldn't articulate. Her own hands carried memories. Thomas's face as fever took him, the weight of medical texts that had been her companions through loneliness, the resistance of needle through flesh as she closed wounds that should have killed. As evening approached, Catherine prepared a heartier stew from her supplies. Swift Fox had begun regaining strength, his movements more assured, his breathing easier. The immediate danger had passed, but she knew he wouldn't be truly ready for the difficult journey back to his people for at least another day. Regardless of Harmon's deadline, a commotion outside drew their attention. Lieutenant Harmon had returned with Corporal Miller to relieve Private Thompson. The exchange of guards proceeded without incident, but Catherine noticed increased tension in the soldier's bearing. When she brought coffee to Miller, who had taken up position where Thompson had been, the corporal's expression was grim. "Everything all right?" she asked, handing him the steaming cup. Miller glanced toward the cabin, then back to her. "Riders came through Jefferson Creek this morning. 4 settler families were found dead 10 miles north of here. Army patrol found them 2 hours ago." Catherine's stomach clenched. "Apache. Looks that way. Arrow shafts, bodies, arranged." He didn't elaborate, but didn't need to. Catherine had seen the aftermath of raids before, the deliberate positioning of the dead as warnings to others. When did it happen? Based on the bodies day before yesterday, before the storm. Miller's implication was clear. Before Swift Fox had arrived at her door, Catherine processed this information, relief mingling with renewed concern. Her patient couldn't have been involved, but the timing couldn't be worse. Settlers wouldn't distinguish between different Apache bands. They would demand retribution against any they found. "Lieutenants ordered reinforcements from the fort," Miller continued. "Patrol will arrive by morning. Word spreading to the outlying homesteads to be on alert." She nodded, understanding the subtext. Her harboring an Apache, even an elderly one with travel papers, would soon become even more controversial. "Thank you for the warning, Corporal." When she returned inside, Swift Fox read her expression immediately. "Bad news comes," he stated rather than asked. Catherine didn't see the point in withholding information. "Families killed north of here. They're saying Apache raiders." Swift Fox closed his eyes briefly, pain of a different sort crossing his features. "Black Knife's warriors again. He breaks from the old ways, kills without honor, brings destruction upon all Apache." "You're certain it was this Black Knife? He is the only one who positions the dead in the old ceremonial patterns. He takes what was sacred and makes it profane." Swift Fox's voice carried genuine sorrow. "Each death ensures more will follow." Catherine moved to the window, gazing out at the lengthening shadows. The frontier suddenly felt smaller, more dangerous, the space between opposing forces narrowing with each new atrocity. "The Army patrol arrives tomorrow," she said. "Lieutenant Harmon will insist you leave, regardless of your condition." Swift Fox considered this. "I can travel if necessary." "Not without risking your wound reopening," she countered. "You need at least another day of rest, and you need to consider your own safety, Catherine Wells." His gaze was direct, unflinching. "Harboring any Apache after such killings, the settlers may not be as reasonable as your lieutenant." The concern in his voice was genuine, making Catherine realize how their positions had shifted. Hours earlier she had been the protector, he the vulnerable patient. Now he showed equal concern for her welfare. "I've faced angry settlers before," she said with more confidence than she felt. "When I treated Mexican workers after the mining accident, there were those who thought I should have left them to die." "This will be different," Swift Fox warned. "Fear makes men capable of things they could not imagine in calmer times." As if summoned by his words, the sound of approaching horses reached them, not the disciplined rhythm of military mounts, but the erratic pace of civilian riders pushing their animals hard. Catherine moved quickly to the window. 3 riders, she reported, her throat tightening, coming fast from the direction of town. Swift Fox rose smoothly despite his injury, reaching for his staff. "The Reeves brothers," he said with certainty. "I know the sound of hatred's approach." Outside, Corporal Miller had stood, rifle ready as he called out to the approaching riders. Lieutenant Harmon emerged from where he'd been resting in the lean-to. Beside the cabin, hand on his sidearm, Catherine turned to Swift Fox, decision already made. "There's a root cellar beneath the pantry floor, hidden from view." The old man shook his head. "I will not hide while you face danger on my behalf." "This isn't a negotiation," Catherine said firmly, moving toward the pantry. "They won't harm me with army witnesses present, but they'll kill you without hesitation." She lifted the concealed trapdoor, revealing narrow steps leading down into darkness. "Please, I can handle the Reeves brothers, but not if I'm worried about protecting you at the same time." Swift Fox held her gaze for a long moment, some internal calculation taking place behind his dark eyes. Finally, he nodded once. "You have wisdom, Catherine Wells. But remember, men like these brothers, they see the world only through the lens of their hatred. Do not expect reason to sway them." "I don't," she assured him grimly. "Now go, quickly." As Swift Fox descended into the cellar, Catherine heard Lieutenant Harmon's voice raised in warning, demanding the riders identify themselves. She closed the trapdoor, sliding a basket of potatoes over it before moving to the front window. Outside, the Reeves brothers had reined in their horses, dust rising around them like the aftermath of a small explosion. Even from a distance, Catherine could see they were armed, rifles in saddle holsters, pistols at their waists. The eldest, Jeremiah Reeves, was doing the talking, gesturing emphatically toward the cabin, while Harmon stood his ground. Catherine straightened her apron, checked that her own small derringer was in her pocket, and stepped onto the porch. The confrontation that had been brewing since she first opened her door to Swift Fox was about to begin in earnest. Behind her, the cabin stood quiet, no sign of her patient visible. But Catherine knew that what happened next would determine not just Swift Fox's fate, but perhaps the direction of her own life in this territory. Some choices, once made, could never be unmade, and standing between an injured Apache elder and men intent on violence was certainly one of them. She stepped forward into the fading light, her shadow stretching long across the ground that had absorbed too much blood already. Jeremiah Reeves was a man built from harsh angles, tall and lean, with a face weathered into permanent lines of bitterness. His brothers flanked him like shadows. Ezekiel, whose missing ear and scarred cheek told their own story of frontier violence, and Matthew, the youngest, whose boyish features seemed at odds with the cold hatred in his eyes. "Evening, Mrs. Wells," Jeremiah called, his voice carrying a forced politeness that did nothing to mask the tension beneath. "Heard you've got yourself an interesting house guest." Catherine descended the porch steps, keeping her movements deliberate and calm. Lieutenant Harmon stood between her and the brothers, his posture stiff with military authority. "Mrs. Wells is treating a patient with legitimate travel papers," Harmon stated flatly. "Army business, not civilian concern." "All due respect, Lieutenant," Jeremiah replied, not sounding respectful at all. "But when Apaches massacre 4 families less than 10 miles from here, every Indian becomes everybody's concern." Catherine stepped forward. "The raids happened before yesterday's storm. My patient arrived during the storm, badly wounded and starving. He couldn't have been involved." Ezekiel spat into the dust. "One Apache's the same as another. They're all savages underneath." "The man inside is nearly 70 years old," Catherine countered, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Hardly in condition to participate in raids." Matthew Reeves, the youngest, leaned forward in his saddle. "Old or young, they all know something, after what they did to those children at Jefferson Creek." His voice caught, genuine emotion breaking through the bravado. "You didn't see it, Mrs. Wells. You didn't see what was left of those families." Lieutenant Harmon shifted position slightly, subtly placing himself more directly between Catherine and the brothers. "I understand your feelings, but this is an official Army matter now. The patrol from Fort Whipple will arrive by morning to investigate the raids properly. And meanwhile, she's harboring one of them right under your nose." Jeremiah argued, gesturing toward Catherine's cabin. Probably, feeding him information about outlying homesteads, troop movements. That's enough, Reeves, Harmon cut in sharply. Mrs. Wells has tended to more wounded soldiers and settlers than anyone in this territory. Her loyalty isn't in question. Catherine felt a surge of gratitude toward the lieutenant. Their relationship had always been professionally cordial, but this defense suggested a respect she hadn't fully recognized before. "We just want to talk to the Apache," Jeremiah insisted, his tone softening to something more reasonable. "Ask him what he knows about Black Knife's band. Could save lives, Lieutenant." "He's resting," Catherine interjected. "Doctor's orders." Ezekiel's laugh was ugly. "Doctor? Is that what you're calling yourself now? Boston nurse playing doctor on the frontier?" The dismissal stung, but Catherine had heard worse in her years of practice. "My patients don't seem to—" "Mind my credentials, Mr. Reeves, including your cousin when I set his broken leg last winter." Corporal Miller, who had maintained his position near the cottonwood, shifted uncomfortably. "Lieutenant, maybe we should let them ask a few questions. Supervised, of course." Harmon's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Catherine realized he was weighing options, his duty to maintain order against the practical reality of 3 armed, angry civilians whose grievances weren't entirely without merit. 10 minutes, Harmon decided finally, in my presence, and if the man is too weak to talk, you leave immediately. Catherine stepped forward, alarm rising. "Lieutenant, I must protest. My patient is an Apache with travel papers, not a prisoner," Harmon finished for her. 10 minutes of questions won't kill him, Mrs. Wells, and it might prevent further bloodshed." The brothers dismounted, tying their horses to Catherine's fence post. Jeremiah's smile held no warmth. "Reasonable decision. Lieutenant, we're just after information, nothing more." Catherine knew better. She'd treated enough victims of frontier justice to recognize the dangerous currents running beneath this conversation. But direct opposition would only escalate the situation. She needed to think strategically. "I'll check on my patient first," she insisted. "Make sure he's strong enough for visitors." Before anyone could object, she turned and walked briskly back to the cabin, mind racing. Once inside, she moved quickly to the pantry, sliding the potato basket aside and lifting the trap door. "Swift Fox," she whispered urgently into the darkness. "Below." "We have a problem." The old man appeared at the bottom of the narrow stairs, his expression calm but alert. "I heard. The Reeves brothers want to question me." "They want much more than that," Catherine replied grimly. "But Lieutenant Harmon has authorized 10 minutes of questioning under his supervision. It's our best option right now." Swift Fox nodded, understanding the impossible situation. "You fear they will return later, without the soldiers?" "Exactly. At least with Harmon present, they'll have to control themselves." She glanced toward the front door, knowing time was short. "Can you play up your weakness? Appear more frail than you are?" A ghost of a smile crossed Swift Fox's weathered face. "I have survived 78 winters by knowing when to appear strong and when to appear weak. Trust me, Catherine Wells." Together, they emerged from the pantry. Catherine helped Swift Fox to a chair by the fire, noting with approval how he exaggerated his limp, allowing his shoulders to stoop further than they had earlier. By the time boots sounded on the porch, he had transformed himself into a perfect picture of elderly frailty. "Lieutenant." Harmon entered first, followed closely by the Reeves brothers. Catherine positioned herself near Swift Fox, medical bag within reach, a silent statement of her role as healer and protector. "There he is," Ezekiel muttered, eyes narrowing as he took in the old Apache. "Doesn't look so fearsome now." Swift Fox gazed back at them, his expression betraying nothing but mild curiosity and fatigue. Lieutenant Harmon remained by the door, hand resting casually near his sidearm. 10 minutes. the officer reminded them. Ask your questions respectfully, or not at all. Jeremiah stepped forward, studying Swift Fox with open hostility. You know about the massacre at Jefferson Creek? Swift Fox nodded slowly. I have heard. A terrible thing. Black Knife's warriors break the old ways. Convenient to blame another band, Matthew said bitterly. How do we know you're not one of them? My papers, Swift Fox replied simply. Agent Burton at San Carlos knows me. I have traveled to gather medicine for my people. Medicine. Jeremiah's tone made the word sound like a curse. 4 families slaughtered, and you expect us to believe you're just gathering plants? Swift Fox met his gaze steadily. I do not expect you to believe anything, Jeremiah Reeves. Your heart is closed to truth that does not feed your anger. The use of his full name startled Jeremiah visibly. How do you know who I am? I know all 3 Reeves brothers, Swift Fox replied. You attacked 2 women from my band last spring. One was my niece, the other lost her baby from the beating. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Catherine glanced at Lieutenant Harmon, whose expression had hardened at this information. That's a lie, Ezekiel snapped, hand moving toward his belt knife. We never touched any squaws. My niece identified you, Swift Fox continued calmly, by the missing ear and the cross-shaped brand on your horse. We did not seek vengeance, though many warriors wanted to. I counseled peace instead. Harmon's attention had sharpened. Is this true, Reeves, about women? Don't tell me you're believing an Apache over white men, Lieutenant, Jeremiah said, avoiding the direct question. Next, you'll be taking their word about the Jefferson Creek families, too. I didn't say I believed anyone yet, Harmon replied evenly. But certain details can be verified. Catherine watched the dynamic shifting in the small cabin. Swift Fox had managed to introduce doubt, to complicate the brothers' simple narrative of innocent settlers versus murderous savages. It was a dangerous gambit. The truth often was in these volatile borderlands. Black Knife's band camps in the Dragoon Mountains, Swift Fox offered unexpectedly. 3 days' ride southeast. They will remain there until the moon is full again, believing the army patrols too busy with other matters to find them. Catherine stared at him in surprise. This was valuable military intelligence, the kind that could lead to a direct confrontation between army forces and hostile warriors. Lieutenant Harmon's expression reflected similar surprise. You're giving up their position. Why? Because Black Knife dishonors all Apache with his actions, Swift Fox answered, his voice carrying the weight of genuine conviction. He kills women and children, breaks the old codes of warrior conduct. As long as he continues, all Apache will suffer for his crimes. Jeremiah laughed harshly. Well, I'll be damned. The old man's turning on his own kind. I turn against those who bring destruction to my people, Swift Fox corrected. Black Knife's path leads only to more graves, Apache and white alike. Catherine saw calculations running behind Harmon's eyes. If the information was accurate, it represented a significant opportunity to apprehend a notorious band responsible for multiple atrocities. Yet the source was an Apache elder with obvious reason to misdirect army attention. How do we know this isn't a trap? Matthew demanded, voicing the obvious concern. You don't, Swift Fox acknowledged. But Lieutenant, Harmon knows the territory. The Dragoons have water year-round and caves for shelter. Logic says a raiding party would go there to rest after attacks. Harmon nodded slowly. It's consistent with previous intelligence. And conveniently far from wherever your own people are hiding, Ezekiel added suspiciously. Swift Fox's expression remained impassive. My band is at the reservation, where Agent Burton ordered us to remain. Only I received permission to travel, and only for medicine. The suspicion in the room remained palpable, but Catherine could see that Swift Fox's information had changed the dynamic. Lieutenant Harmon, was now considering military strategy rather than the immediate question of one elderly Apache's presence in a frontier cabin. "I'll include this intelligence in my report to the patrol arriving tomorrow," Harmon decided. "Colonel, Fletcher will determine if it warrants immediate action." Jeremiah stepped closer to Swift Fox, lowering his voice. "If you're lying, old man, if this is some trick to protect your murdering friends, I'll find you myself, papers or no papers." "You have lost people to violence," Swift Fox replied quietly. "As have I, as have most who live in this territory. The path of vengeance is well traveled, but leads nowhere worth reaching." Something in the simple statement seemed to penetrate Jeremiah's anger, if only momentarily. He straightened, glancing at his brothers. "We've got what we came for, Lieutenant. We'll be on our way." He turned to Catherine, his expression unreadable. "Ma'am." The formality seemed forced, but Catherine acknowledged it with a nod. "Mr. Reeves." Lieutenant Harmon escorted the brothers out, leaving Catherine alone with Swift Fox. The moment the door closed, the old man's posture changed subtly, still showing fatigue but less exaggerated dependency. "You just provided military intelligence against your own people," Catherine said quietly, troubled by the implications. "I provided truth," Swift Fox corrected. "Black Knife's band is indeed in the Dragoons. They will indeed remain until the full moon, and they should indeed be stopped before more innocents die." Catherine studied his face, searching for deception, but finding only weary resolve. "Why? You know what the army will do if they find them." "I know what Black Knife will do if they don't," he countered. "More raids, more dead families, more hatred burning through this land like wildfire." He sighed, the sound carrying the weight of decades of witnessed violence. "And with each new grave, the hope of peace grows dimmer for all Apache." The clarity of his reasoning struck Catherine with unexpected force. Swift Fox wasn't betraying his people. He was trying to save them from the consequences of actions he believed would bring destruction upon all Apache bands, guilty and innocent alike. "The lieutenant believed you," she observed. "Harmon is a soldier, but not a foolish one. He will verify what can be verified." Swift Fox adjusted his position, grimacing slightly as the movement pulled at his wound. "The question now is whether the Reeves brothers truly accepted his authority." Catherine moved to the window, watching as Harmon spoke with the brothers beside their horses. Their body language suggested continued argument, but eventually they mounted and rode away, casting dark glances back toward the cabin. "They're leaving," she reported with relief that felt premature. "Lieutenant Harmon seems to have convinced them." "For now," Swift Fox agreed, "but such men rarely abandon their purpose entirely." Lieutenant Harmon returned shortly, his expression grim but determined. "They've agreed to let the army handle the situation," he informed them, "but I don't trust their word. I've ordered Corporal Miller to maintain watch through the night." "Thank you, Lieutenant," Catherine said sincerely. Harmon nodded, then turned, his attention to Swift Fox. "If your information proves accurate, old man, you'll have done a service to both our peoples. If not—" He let the implication hang unfinished. "Truth needs no threats to remain true," Swift Fox replied simply. The lieutenant seemed to accept this cryptic response. "The patrol arrives at dawn. I expect you to be ready to travel back to San Carlos by first light." After Harmon departed, Catherine checked Swift Fox's wound again. The stitches remained intact, though the area showed signs of inflammation. Nothing dangerous yet, but concerning for someone about to undertake a difficult journey. "You can't possibly travel all the way to San Carlos tomorrow," she said, applying fresh yarrow poultice. "It's at least 3 days hard riding and you're still recovering." Swift Fox seemed unconcerned. "I will not be going to San Carlos. But Lieutenant Harmon expects me to follow the Army's orders," he finished for her. But I must return to my people first. There are matters that require my attention." Catherine sat back on her heels, studying him with growing suspicion. "What aren't you telling me, Swift Fox? First you provide military intelligence against another Apache band, and now you're planning to defy direct orders to return to the reservation." The old man's dark eyes met hers directly. "I have told you no lies, Catherine Wells, but I have not told you everything." He paused, seeming to weigh his next words carefully. "I am not simply an elder gathering medicine. I am Swift Fox, who speaks with thunder, spiritual leader of the Mountain Shadow Band, what your people might call a shaman or holy man." The revelation settled over Catherine slowly, its implications expanding with each passing moment. No wonder he carried travel papers when most Apache were confined to reservations. No wonder he spoke with such authority about Black Knife's violations of warrior codes. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" she asked. "Would it have changed your decision to help me?" "No," she admitted, "but it might have helped me understand the risks better." Swift Fox nodded, accepting this. "My grandsons, Wolf-Caller and Running Deer, they are not simply young warriors. They lead war parties when necessary, though they prefer peace. They will be searching for me since I did not return when expected." Catherine absorbed this new information with growing concern. "Are you saying your grandsons might come looking for you with war parties?" "They will come," Swift Fox confirmed. "The only question is whether they find me here or on the trail tomorrow." The implications were staggering. If Apache warriors encountered her cabin with army guards present, the potential for bloodshed was immediate and severe. Yet if Swift Fox left with the patrol as ordered, weakened and vulnerable, he might never reach his people safely. "What are you planning to do?" she asked finally. Swift Fox's expression remained calm, though his eyes held a quiet intensity. "Tonight I must perform a ritual, a calling to guide my grandsons safely here. In the old days, such spiritual work would be done with sacred objects at sacred places. Here, I must use what is available." "A ritual?" Catherine repeated skeptically. Her medical training rebelled against such concepts, yet she'd seen enough on the frontier to know that dismissing unfamiliar practices often meant missing valuable knowledge. "You have been taught that body and spirit are separate," Swift Fox observed. "My people know they are one. The ritual heals both." Catherine considered her options. The practical solution would be to insist Swift Fox follow the army's orders, return to San Carlos, and avoid any potential confrontation between his grandson's war party and the soldiers. But something in his certainty gave her pause. Throughout their brief acquaintance, his judgment had proven sound, his insights valuable. "What do you need for this ritual?" she asked finally. Relief flickered briefly across Swift Fox's weathered features. "A small fire, clean water, and privacy." Night had fallen completely now. Through the window, Catherine could see Corporal Miller, maintaining his watch beneath the cottonwood rifle across his lap. Lieutenant Harmon had retired to the lean-to for a few hours' rest before his turn at guard duty. "I can give you an hour," she decided. "No more. I'll tell the corporal I'm changing your bandages and need privacy." Swift Fox inclined his head, the gesture conveying gratitude beyond words. "You continue to surprise me, Catherine Wells. Few white people would understand the importance of such things." "I don't pretend to understand," she clarified, rising to gather what he needed. "But I've learned that healing takes many forms. If this ritual brings you comfort, I won't stand in its way." As she arranged a small fire in the stove and filled a clay bowl with clean water, Catherine wondered at the strange turn her life had taken. 2 days ago, she had been a solitary frontier doctor, navigating the narrow space between opposing worlds. Now she was facilitating an Apache spiritual ceremony in her cabin, while armed guards stood watch outside. Once everything was prepared, She stepped outside briefly to speak with Corporal Miller, explaining that her patient required treatment that demanded privacy. The young soldier accepted this with minimal questioning. Medical matters still carried a certain mysterious authority on the frontier. When she returned, Swift Fox had moved to sit cross-legged before the stove, his expression more formal than she had yet seen. The transformation was subtle but profound, the vulnerable patient becoming something else entirely, a man connected to powers and traditions Catherine could barely comprehend. "I will begin now," he said quietly. "What you witness, few white eyes have seen." Catherine nodded, settling into her rocking chair at a respectful distance. "I'll keep watch at the window. We have 1 hour before the lieutenant takes the next guard shift." As Swift Fox began his ritual, a low, rhythmic chanting punctuated by gestures over the water and fire, Catherine found herself drawn despite her scientific skepticism. There was something hypnotic about the cadence, something powerful in the absolute conviction with which he performed each movement. Outside, the Arizona night deepened around her small cabin. Stars emerged in brilliant profusion across the vast sky, while coyotes called to each other from distant ridges. In this moment between worlds, as an Apache holy man worked ancient ceremonies in her frontier home, Catherine Wells felt the rigid boundaries of her understanding begin to shift. She couldn't know then how this ritual would reverberate through the coming days, or how Swift Fox's grandsons would indeed find their way to her doorstep with a force that would change everything. She knew only that she had crossed some invisible line in her own consciousness, from merely treating a patient to becoming part of a story far larger and more complex than she had imagined. The chanting continued, filling the cabin with sounds that seemed to belong to the landscape itself, as ancient as the red rocks and as powerful as the storms that swept across them. And somewhere, miles away but drawing closer with each passing hour, wolf caller and running deer led 70 warriors toward a rendezvous that destiny had arranged through the unlikely intersection of an Apache holy man and a frontier doctor who had chosen compassion over fear. Dawn broke over the Arizona territory in bands of gold and crimson, painting Catherine's small homestead in a deceptively peaceful light. She hadn't slept, not with Swift Fox's ritual and subsequent revelations occupying her thoughts. Instead, she'd spent the night alternating between watching the old man rest and peering through her window at the changing guard shifts. Lieutenant Harmon now stood where Corporal Miller had been, rifle ready as he scanned the surrounding landscape. In the growing light, Catherine could see a dust cloud on the eastern horizon, the approaching Army patrol from Fort Whipple. Swift Fox noticed it too, as he accepted the cup of coffee she offered. "They come earlier than expected," he observed, his voice betraying no concern despite the implications. "You need to make a decision," Catherine said quietly. "The patrol will insist on escorting you back to San Carlos immediately." The old man sipped his coffee thoughtfully. "My decision was made during the night. My grandsons received my message. They come from the north, following the ridgeline to avoid detection." Catherine moved to the north-facing window, straining to see any sign of approaching riders. The rugged terrain revealed nothing unusual, just the familiar contours of mesquite and rock formations. "I see no one," she said. "They are Apache," Swift Fox replied simply. "You will not see them until they wish to be seen." The certainty in his voice sent a chill through her. "How many?" "Enough." His gaze met hers steadily. "I must leave before the patrol arrives. Meeting between warriors and soldiers here would bring only bloodshed." Catherine understood the logic, but questioned the practicality. "Lieutenant Harmon won't let you simply walk away, and you're still not strong enough for a difficult journey." "I have regained more strength than you realize," Swift Fox assured her. The ritual helped heal both body and spirit. As if to demonstrate, he rose from his chair with surprising ease, moving to gather his few belongings. The transformation was remarkable. The stooped, weakened elder had been replaced by a man who, while still showing signs of recent injury, carried himself with quiet authority. "You've been misleading me about your condition," Catherine realized, unsure whether to feel professional indignation or reluctant admiration. Not misleading, conserving strength when needed, using it when necessary. Swift Fox secured his medicine pouch at his belt. Now it is necessary. Outside, hoofbeats announced the patrol's arrival. Catherine counted at least 8 riders accompanying. A wagon, significant firepower for an escort mission. Lieutenant Harmon was already moving to meet them, his posture straightening into military formality. "It's too late," she told Swift Fox. "You'll never make it past them now." The old man paused, reassessing the situation. "Then we must create a different path." Before Catherine could question his meaning, a sharp cry came from beyond the northern ridge, a sound unlike any bird or animal she recognized. Swift Fox's head lifted, a slight smile crossing his weathered features. "They come," he said simply. Lieutenant Harmon had heard it too. His rifle raised as he scanned the ridgeline, signaling the newly arrived patrol to take defensive positions. Within moments, the calm morning had transformed into a battlefield preparation, with soldiers forming a perimeter around the cabin and wagon. A tall officer dismounted, Colonel Fletcher, Catherine presumed, known for his harsh but effective handling of Apache matters. He approached Harmon while gesturing for 2 soldiers to secure the cabin. Catherine turned to Swift Fox, alarm rising. "If they find you ready to travel, they'll assume you were planning to escape. It could turn violent immediately." Swift Fox nodded, quickly resuming his appearance of greater frailty, leaning on his walking stick and allowing his shoulders to stoop. "Trust that I know these men and their ways," he advised quietly. "And when the moment comes, be prepared." To step aside. Before she could question this cryptic instruction, the door burst open. 2 soldiers entered, rifles ready, followed by Colonel Fletcher, a broad-shouldered man with a thick mustache and cold, assessing eyes. "Mrs. Wells," he acknowledged curtly before his gaze settled on Swift Fox, "and the Apache." "Lieutenant Harmon. Reports you've been cooperative, old man. That cooperation needs to continue." Swift Fox bowed his head slightly, the picture of respectful acquiescence. "I follow the path of peace, Colonel." Fletcher seemed unimpressed by this declaration. "We'll see. The patrol will escort you directly to San Carlos, where Agent Burton can decide what to do with you." He turned to Catherine. "Mrs. Wells, gather whatever medical supplies he needs for the journey. You have 5 minutes." Catherine bristled at the tone, but kept her expression neutral. She'd encountered enough military men to know when an argument was futile. Instead, she moved to her medical cabinet, selecting herbs and bandages while listening to Fletcher continue. "There's been another raid," the colonel informed them, watching Swift Fox closely for reaction. "Stagecoach ambushed 15 miles west of here. 2 passengers killed, driver wounded." Swift Fox's expression remained unchanged. "Black Knife's warriors move quickly between attacks. As I told Lieutenant Harmon, they camp in the Dragoon Mountains." Fletcher's eyebrows rose slightly. "Lieutenant mentioned your cooperative information. Convenient that it places hostile Apache far from where we found you." "Truth needs no convenience to be true," Swift Fox replied, using the same phrase he'd offered Harmon earlier. The colonel snorted, clearly unimpressed with philosophical observations. "We'll determine the truth soon enough. The patrol is dividing, half escorting you to San Carlos, half investigating your claims about the dragoons." Catherine handed Swift Fox a small pouch of medicinal herbs. "These will help prevent infection and reduce pain," she explained, deliberately using her professional tone. Apply the yarrow poultice morning and evening until the wound closes completely. Swift Fox accepted the medicine with a nod of thanks, his eyes communicating more than the simple gesture conveyed. There was warning there, and preparation. For what? Catherine couldn't be certain. Time to move, Fletcher ordered, gesturing toward the door. Wagons ready. As they stepped outside, Catherine was struck by how quickly her small homestead had transformed into a military operation. Soldiers maintained vigilant positions, eyes scanning the surrounding terrain. The supply wagon had been modified with bench seating, presumably for transporting their Apache prisoner. Lieutenant Harmon approached, his expression troubled. Colonel, that signal cry came from the North Ridge. Scout reports signs of multiple riders moving parallel to our position. Fletcher's had moved to his sidearm. Apache? Likely, Harmon confirmed. Tracks suggest at least a dozen, maybe more. The colonel's attention snapped to Swift Fox, suspicion hardening into certainty. You knew they were coming? That's why you've been so cooperative. You were stalling for time. Swift Fox met his accusation with calm dignity. I told no lies. Colonel, Black Knife's band is indeed in the dragoons, but I also told no one that my own people would not come looking for me. Catherine felt tensions escalating dangerously. Soldiers were adjusting positions, rifles raising as they scanned. The ridgeline with increasing urgency. What had been a simple escort mission was rapidly becoming a potential confrontation between Apache warriors and army forces, with her homestead caught in the middle. Get him in the wagon, Fletcher ordered sharply. We're moving out immediately. 2. Soldiers moved to take Swift Fox by the arms. Catherine stepped forward instinctively, medical concern overriding caution. He's still recovering from a serious injury. Rough handling could reopen his wound. Step back, Mrs. Wells, Fletcher commanded. This is now a military matter. The second cry came then, different from the first, more urgent. Swift Fox straightened, suddenly seeming inches taller despite his years. My grandsons approach under the banner of parley, he announced. They seek peaceful resolution. Parley? Fletcher laughed harshly. Apache don't parley. They ambush. These Apache do, Swift Fox insisted. They are led by Wolf Caller and Running Deer, who have dealt honorably with Agent Burton many times. They wish only to ensure my safe return. Colonel Fletcher hesitated, military calculation evident in his expression. A confrontation with Apache warriors risked casualties on both sides, and if what Swift Fox claimed was true, about Black Knife's band being the real perpetrators of recent atrocities, engaging the wrong Apache could squander valuable resources. Lieutenant Harmon, he called finally, your assessment. Harmon stepped closer, keeping his voice low. Swift Fox has been truthful with us so far, sir, and his information about Black Knife's location matches other intelligence reports. If these approaching Apache are indeed seeking peaceful resolution, Fletcher nodded curtly. 2 riders under white flag, he decided. The rest stay back, or we consider it a hostile action. Catherine watched as a soldier tied a piece of white cloth to a ramrod and waved it above the perimeter. Minutes passed in tense silence, the only sound the occasional stamp of horses' hooves and the creak of leather as soldiers maintained their ready positions. Then, from the northern ridge, 2 riders appeared. They approached slowly, deliberately, visible, a significant departure from Apache tactics. One carried a makeshift white flag fashioned from buckskin. As they drew closer, Catherine could see they were young men, perhaps in their late 20s, their faces bearing the distinctive features that marked them as Swift Fox's kin. Fletcher ordered his men to maintain positions while he, Harmon, and Catherine advanced to meet the riders. Swift Fox was kept under guard near the wagon, though his expression showed notable relief at the sight of the approaching men. The riders halted 30 yards away, assessing the armed soldiers with cautious eyes. The taller of the two spoke first, his English clear but accented. "I am Wolf Collar, grandson of Swift Fox who speaks with thunder. We come seeking the peaceful return of our elder." Fletcher kept his hand near his sidearm. "Your grandfather was found injured and starving. He's been treated and is being escorted back to San Carlos Reservation as required by law." The second rider, Running Deer, Catherine presumed, spoke next. "Our people are not from San Carlos. We belong to Mountain Shadow Band, with permission to travel these territories for seasonal hunting." He produced a folded document from inside his buckskin shirt, similar to Swift Fox's papers, but more official-looking, with Army and Bureau of Indian Affairs seals visible. Fletcher examined the document with obvious skepticism, but even he could not dismiss the authorized signatures. "These appear legitimate," he acknowledged reluctantly, "but they don't change the fact that unaccompanied Apache outside reservations must be detained and returned to appropriate authorities." "We are the appropriate authorities for our grandfather," Wolf Collar stated firmly. "Our band camps 3 hours' ride north. We will escort him there, where our medicine woman can continue treatment." Catherine stepped forward, medical expertise, giving her confidence to enter the negotiation. "I'm the doctor who's been treating Swift Fox. His wound is healing well, but requires continued care. Rough travel could cause complications." Wolf Collar's gaze shifted to her, assessment in his dark eyes. "You are the medicine woman who showed kindness when others would not. Our grandfather spoke of you in his message." The simple acknowledgement warmed Catherine unexpectedly. She'd acted out of professional duty and human compassion, not expecting recognition or gratitude. "Message?" Fletcher interrupted sharply. "What message?" Running Deer exchanged glances with his brother. "Our grandfather has ways of communicating that your people do not understand, Colonel. It is not important how we knew, only that we are here now to ensure his safe return." Fletcher's expression darkened at what he clearly interpreted as evasion. "There are 70 armed soldiers at Fort Whipple who will be very interested if anything happens to this patrol. Remember that before you consider any communication with your warriors in the hills." Wolf Collar remained impassive, neither confirming nor denying the implied threat of ambush. "We seek only our grandfather's return. No blood need be shed." Today, the standoff continued, tension palpable in the clear morning air. Catherine glanced back at Swift Fox, who watched the proceedings with steady calm, as if the outcome was already determined in ways the others couldn't perceive. After a long moment, Fletcher spoke again. "Your grandfather provided information about Black Knife's band, information that could help stop the killings of innocent settlers. Was he telling the truth?" "Black Knife camps in the Dragoons until the full moon," Wolf Collar confirmed without hesitation. "His warriors were responsible for the deaths at Jefferson Creek and the stagecoach attack, not our people." This corroboration seemed to sway Fletcher slightly. He conferred briefly with Lieutenant Harmon, their voices too low for Catherine to hear, before turning back to the Apache riders. "Here's what happens," Fletcher announced. "We'll release Swift Fox to your custody, but a patrol will escort all of you to the edge of your hunting grounds to verify your story. Any deviation from your stated camp location, any sign of additional warriors joining you, and my men have orders to fire." Wolf Collar considered this, then nodded once. "Acceptable terms. We will ride slowly so our grandfather is not taxed beyond his strength." As arrangements were made for the transfer, Catherine approached Swift Fox, medical concerns still foremost. In her mind, despite the political complexities swirling around them, "Are you certain you're strong enough for this journey?" she asked quietly, checking his bandages one last time. Swift Fox's weathered face softened into something approaching affection. "Thanks to your care, yes. My body heals quickly now that my spirit has been restored." He studied her face intently. You took great risk for a stranger, Catherine Wells. Such choices reveal the true nature of a person. I'm a doctor, she replied simply. Helping the injured isn't a choice, it's a duty. Some duties are chosen, others thrust upon us. Swift. Fox observed, you chose yours, and held to it despite pressure to abandon it. My people value such integrity. Before Catherine could respond, Wolf-Caller approached, respectfully waiting until their conversation paused before speaking. We are prepared to leave, grandfather, he said, helping the older man to his feet. The soldiers grow impatient. Swift Fox nodded, then turned back to Catherine. 3 days, he said cryptically. Watch for our return. The statement caught her off guard. Return? The colonel's orders are his to give, ours to interpret, Swift Fox replied with the ghost of a smile. 3 days, Catherine Wells. There is more to this story than has yet been told. With those enigmatic words, he allowed his grandsons to help him onto a horse, his movements deliberately measured to maintain the appearance of greater weakness than he actually felt. Catherine watched as the unusual procession organized itself. Swift Fox, flanked by his grandsons, surrounded by a perimeter of mounted soldiers, Colonel Fletcher and Lieutenant Harmon leading the formation. As they prepared to depart, running, Deer unexpectedly broke from the group, riding to where Catherine stood. He reached into a pouch at his belt and extended his closed fist toward her. For the medicine woman who saved our grandfather, he said, opening his hand to reveal a small object that caught the morning light. Catherine accepted it, surprised to find a silver medallion on a leather cord, the surface etched with symbols. She didn't recognize surrounding a small turquoise stone at its center. It carries protection, Running Deer explained. Wear it. The coming days may bring danger to your door. Before she could question this ominous warning, he had rejoined the procession. Catherine watched them ride away, the silver medallion cool against her palm, Swift Fox's words echoing in her mind. 3 days. Watch for our return. The homestead felt eerily quiet after they departed. Catherine moved through her morning routine, automatically, cleaning the cabin, organizing medical supplies, tending her storm-damaged garden. But her thoughts remained fixed on the strange events that had transformed her life in less than 48 hours. By midday, another complication arrived. The Reeves brothers returned, this time without the moderating presence of Lieutenant Harmon or Colonel Fletcher. They approached her porch with the confident swagger of men who believed themselves answerable to no authority but their own. Afternoon, Mrs. Wells, Jeremiah called, his false politeness even thinner than before. Heard your Apache patient found his people this morning. Catherine straightened from her gardening, acutely aware of her isolation. The nearest neighbor was 5 miles away, the patrol long gone toward the northern hunting grounds. News travels fast, she observed, keeping her voice neutral while calculating the distance to the rifle inside her door. Territories burning with it, Ezekiel added. Apache holy man rescued by his warriors right under the army's nose. The description was dramatically exaggerated, but Catherine knew better than to correct them. If you're looking for medical attention, I'm available. Otherwise, I have work to finish before dark. Matthew, the youngest brother, moved closer, his boyish face hardened into something uglier. Folks are talking, Mrs. Wells, about where your loyalties lie, about a Boston doctor treating Indians while settler families are being massacred. I treat whoever needs treatment, Catherine replied evenly, as I would treat any of you if needed. Jeremiah spat into the dust. That's just it, isn't it? Treating savages and settlers the same, as if there's no difference between civilized folk and Apache butchers. Catherine felt anger rising, but kept her expression controlled. Medicine doesn't recognize such distinctions, Mr. Reeves, nor should humanity. Humanity? Ezekiel laughed harshly. Tell that to the Jefferson Creek children. Tell that to the women on that stagecoach. Black Knife's warriors are responsible for those atrocities, Catherine countered. "Not all Apache. Swift Fox's band has kept peace with settlers for years." The brothers exchanged glances, something passing between them that made Catherine's skin prickle with warning. "You believe that old man's stories?" Jeremiah asked, moving to block her path to the cabin door. "Apache lie as easily as they breathe. While you were nursing him back to health, his warriors could have been planning the next massacre." Catherine knew she was treading dangerous ground, but professional integrity wouldn't allow her to remain silent. Swift Fox provided information to help the army locate Black Knife's band, information that could prevent further attacks, or information that sends soldiers on a wild chase while the real war party strikes elsewhere, Matthew suggested darkly. "You ever think of that, Mrs. Wells? Ever think you might have blood on those healing hands of yours?" The accusation struck with unexpected force. Catherine had considered the possibility, of course, that Swift Fox might have misled them all, that her compassion might have been manipulated for darker purposes. But everything in her medical and human judgment told her the old man had been sincere. "I think," she said carefully, "that jumping to conclusions without evidence brings its own kind of bloodshed, as you three know better than most." The reference to Swift Fox's accusation about the Reeves brothers attacking Apache women was deliberate, a calculated risk to remind them that their own actions weren't above scrutiny. Jeremiah's face darkened. "Careful, Mrs. Wells. Territory's dangerous for a woman alone, especially one who takes an Indian's word over her own kind." The threat was thinly veiled, but before Catherine could respond, the sound of approaching hoofbeats interrupted them. A rider appeared from the direction of Jefferson Creek, a young man she recognized as Billy Thornton, son of the storekeeper in the small settlement. "Mrs. Wells," he called, reining in his lathered horse, "you're needed urgent. Simmons' family, their boy fell from the hayloft, legs bad broken, bleeding something fierce." The medical emergency immediately overrode all other concerns. Catherine turned toward her cabin. "I'll get my bag." "How far?" 4 miles southeast, Billy replied, wiping sweat from his brow. "Pa sent me straight away when they brought the boy in." Catherine glanced at the Reeves brothers, professional duty providing an unexpected escape from their veiled threats. "As you can see, gentlemen, I'm needed elsewhere. Other patients require my attention." Jeremiah's expression suggested this wasn't the end of their conversation, merely a postponement. "We'll talk again, Mrs. Wells. Count on it." As Catherine gathered her medical supplies and saddled her horse, she couldn't shake the feeling that larger forces were converging around her small homestead, forces set in motion by a simple act of compassion during a dust storm. Swift Fox's warning echoed in her mind as she secured the silver medallion around her neck. 3 days. Watch for our return. Whatever was coming, Catherine Wells would face it as she had faced every frontier challenge, with steady hands, clear purpose, and the conviction that healing transcended the arbitrary boundaries humans drew between themselves. She rode away from her cabin with the Reeves brothers' hostile gazes following her, unaware that their confrontation had been observed by watchful eyes from the distant ridgeline. Apache eyes that would carry word back to Wolf Caller and Running Deer about the 3 men who threatened the medicine woman who had saved their grandfather. The next 3 days would change everything, though Catherine couldn't yet imagine how. Catherine didn't return to her homestead until late afternoon the following day. The Simmons boy's injury had been severe, a compound fracture that required hours of careful work to set properly, followed by an anxious night monitoring for signs of infection. By the time she'd stabilized him enough to leave in his mother's care, exhaustion had settled deep in her bones. As she crested the final ridge overlooking her property, Catherine slowed her horse, instinct warning her that something had changed. The cabin appeared undisturbed, her garden and small corral exactly as she'd left them, yet something felt wrong. She dismounted cautiously, leading her horse the final stretch rather than riding in openly. Years on the frontier had taught her to trust such instincts. They'd saved her life more than once during Apache raids in the early days, before the uneasy peace had settled over this part of the territory. The cabin door stood slightly ajar, a detail that confirmed her suspicions. Catherine never left it open, not even in the hottest weather. Someone had been inside. Perhaps it still was. She secured her horse behind the woodpile, out of sight from the cabin, and retrieved the small derringer from her medical bag. The weight of it felt alien in her hand. She'd taken an oath to heal, not harm, but frontier. Reality sometimes required compromises with idealism. The silver medallion running deer had given her rested cool against her skin beneath her collar. For protection, he'd said. Catherine wasn't superstitious, but she found herself touching it briefly before approaching the cabin. She circled around back, peering through windows before making her move. The interior looked undisturbed. Beds still made, medical supplies still organized on their shelves, but the faint scuff marks on her otherwise clean floor told their own story. Someone had searched the place, and with some care. Catherine entered cautiously, derringer ready, senses alert for any sound. The cabin remained silent. Whoever had been here was gone, at least for now. A methodical inspection revealed what they'd been after. Her small lockbox had been forced open, papers scattered on her desk. Most were medical records, but among them had been Swift Fox's travel documents, which she'd kept as reference. Those were missing. More concerning was the discovery in her pantry. The root cellar door had been left open, revealing the hiding place where Swift Fox had concealed himself during the Reeves brothers' first visit. Catherine felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cellar's cool air. Someone had been thorough in their search, looking not just for documents, but for evidence of her harboring Apache visitors. The Reeves brothers were the obvious suspects, but the careful, methodical nature of the search suggested something more official. Military, perhaps, or territorial authorities investigating rumors about a frontier doctor sympathizing with hostiles. Catherine closed up the cellar and began restoring order to her papers. As she worked, she noticed something she'd missed initially. A small piece of red cloth tucked beneath her pillow. Unfolding it revealed a crude drawing, a cabin with flames rising from its roof. The threat couldn't have been clearer. Someone wanted her gone, or worse. She sat heavily on her bed, the derringer still clutched in one hand, the threatening drawing in the other. In the span of 3 days, her carefully constructed life had unraveled completely. All because she'd chosen to help a wounded man during a storm. No, she corrected herself. Not because of that choice itself, but because of what that choice represented. A refusal to let arbitrary boundaries of race and politics dictate her professional ethics. A stubborn insistence on seeing humanity where others saw only enemies. Catherine tucked the cloth drawing into her pocket and finished tidying her scattered papers. Whoever had left this warning wanted her frightened, intimidated into leaving or renouncing her treatment of Swift Fox. They'd underestimated her. Night fell quickly, as it often did in the territory. Catherine secured her doors and windows, keeping her rifle close as she prepared a simple meal. Sleep would be difficult, but she needed rest. The Simmons boy required checking tomorrow, and her own defenses needed strengthening if trouble was brewing. As she sat in the near darkness, illuminated only by the small stove fire, Catherine found herself returning to Swift Fox's parting words. 3 days. Watch for our return. 1 day had already passed, eventful though it had been. What would the remaining 2 bring? The night passed without incident, though Catherine slept lightly, waking at every coyote call and wind gust. Dawn brought no answers, only a continuation of the waiting. She tended her garden, checked her supplies, and rode out to examine the Simmons boy, finding him feverish but stable. When she returned in the afternoon, 2 unexpected visitors awaited. Lieutenant Harmon and a civilian she didn't recognize, both on horseback near her corral. "Mrs. Wells," Harmon greeted her, his expression more grave than usual. "This is Marshal Davis from the Territorial Authority. He has some questions for you." Catherine dismounted, appraising the marshal, a hard-looking man with a badge on his vest and evaluating eyes that missed nothing. "Questions about what, specifically?" "Your recent Apache visitor," Davis replied, his voice carrying the flat certainty of a man accustomed to authority, "and certain allegations that have been made regarding your sympathies." Catherine maintained her composure with effort. "I treated an injured elderly man who happened to be Apache, as I would treat anyone requiring medical attention. So I've heard," Davis acknowledged, dismounting and handing his reins to Harmon. "Mind if we continue this inside?" It wasn't really a request. Catherine led them into her cabin, noting how the marshal's gaze immediately catalogued every detail of her living space. While Harmon remained respectfully near the door, Davis made himself comfortable at her table without invitation. Lieutenant Harmon provided a full report about Swift Fox and the encounter with his grandsons. Davis began, removing a notebook from his pocket. "What concerns the Territorial Authority is information we've received suggesting you may have had prior contact with this Apache band." Catherine's surprise must have shown. Prior contact? Absolutely not. I'd never met Swift Fox before he appeared at my door during the storm. "Yet you seemed remarkably comfortable harboring him," Davis observed. "Most frontier women would have barred their doors against any Apache, injured or not." "I'm a doctor first, Marshal. My gender and location don't change that." Davis made a non-committal sound, flipping through his notebook. "We have testimony from certain local residents suggesting you've shown what they consider unnatural sympathy toward Indians in the past, leaving supplies along trails known to be used by Apache, treating Mexican laborers and even Yavapai Indians who've come to your door." Catherine felt anger rising but kept her voice level. "I've never hidden my medical practice. I treat humans in need regardless of their origin." "A commendable sentiment in theory," Davis replied with practiced neutrality. "More complicated in practice, especially given recent events." "Recent events perpetrated by Black Knife's band," Catherine pointed out. "Not Swift Fox's people, a distinction that seems lost on many." Davis fixed her with a direct stare. "Here's my concern, Mrs. Wells. The territorial governor is under significant pressure to demonstrate control over the Apache situation. Settlers are demanding protection. The army is stretched thin. Into this volatile situation, we have reports of a Boston-educated woman doctor providing aid and comfort to the very people many settlers consider enemies." "Medical treatment isn't aid and comfort to enemies," Catherine countered. "It's a professional obligation. Perhaps in Boston," Davis said dismissively. "Out here, loyalties are simpler. You're either with your own kind or against them." Lieutenant Harmon shifted uncomfortably by the door, but remained silent. Catherine realized she would find no support from that quarter, military duty overriding whatever personal respect he might hold for her. "Is there an actual legal charge being considered, Marshal?" she asked directly. "Or is this merely an attempt to intimidate me into abandoning my medical ethics?" Davis smiled thinly, closing his notebook. "No charges at present. Consider this a friendly warning. The territory is changing, Mrs. Wells. The days when isolated homesteaders could make their own rules are ending. Territorial authority is being established, and with it comes certain expectations of community loyalty." "I'm loyal to my oath as a doctor," Catherine replied firmly. "If that conflicts with your definition of community loyalty, so be it." The marshal stood, adjusting his hat. "Lieutenant Harmon tells me Swift Fox claimed his people would return in 3 days. Today marks day 2 by my count." His eyes locked with hers. "If armed Apache appear at your homestead for any reason, regardless of their stated purpose, it will be considered hostile action. The Army has authorization to respond accordingly." With that parting threat, Davis nodded to Harmon and strode out. The lieutenant lingered briefly, something like apologetic concern in his expression. "Mrs. Wells," he began awkwardly, "Colonel Fletcher has posted men on the ridges overlooking the main approaches. They have orders to fire on any Apache approaching settlements, including your homestead." "Even if they come under white flag?" Catherine asked, remembering Wolf Caller's peaceful approach. "Even then," Harmon confirmed grimly. "After Jefferson Creek and the stagecoach, there's no appetite for distinction or negotiation." "I thought you should know." After they departed, Catherine stood in her doorway, watching dust rise from their horses' hooves as they rode toward Jefferson Creek. The marshal's warning had been clear enough. Her professional principles were becoming politically inconvenient. The silver medallion felt suddenly heavier against her skin. "For protection," Running Deer had said. But what protection could a piece of Apache silver offer against territorial marshals and army patrols? As evening approached on the second day, Catherine made a difficult decision. If Swift Fox's people did return as promised, they would be riding into potential slaughter. She needed to warn them somehow, to prevent bloodshed on her doorstep. But how? She had no way to communicate with the Apache band, no knowledge of where exactly they might be camped. The only certainty was Swift Fox's promise: 3 days. Watch. For our return, darkness fell with no sign of Apache riders. Catherine maintained her vigil nonetheless, watching from her window as stars emerged across the vast Arizona sky. When sleep finally claimed her near midnight, her dreams were troubled. Images of Swift Fox performing his ritual mixed with visions of armed confrontation on her homestead. She woke before dawn on the third day with absolute certainty that something had changed. The air itself felt charged, like the stillness before a storm. Catherine dressed quickly and stepped onto her porch, scanning the surrounding landscape in the growing light. Nothing moved on the visible ridgelines where Harmon had said soldiers were posted. Her small garden stood undisturbed, morning dew glistening on vegetable leaves. Yet the certainty remained. Something fundamental had shifted during the night. The answer came with the morning's first full light. There, arranged carefully on her porch steps, sat objects that hadn't been there the evening before. A small deerskin pouch, exquisitely beaded. A bundle of herbs she recognized as rare medicinal plants. And most surprisingly, a silver band hammered into the form of a serpent eating its own tail. A symbol she recalled from her medical training, the Ouroboros representing eternal return and renewal. Someone had visited during the night, leaving these gifts without disturbing her sleep. Apache, almost certainly. Their ability to move silently is legendary, even among those who dismissed other aspects of their culture. Catherine gathered the items, understanding their significance. The medicinal herbs represented an exchange of healing knowledge. The beaded pouch contained small turquoise stones, valuable trade items among southwestern tribes. And the silver band was clearly meant as personal adornment, perhaps even ceremonial. These were not random gifts. They were carefully selected offerings that acknowledged her as a healer, as someone worthy of respect and exchange. The fact that they'd been delivered despite army patrols suggested either remarkable stealth or intimate knowledge of patrol patterns. As she examined the silver band more closely, Catherine noticed small markings etched into its surface, symbols similar to those on the medallion Running Deer had given her. Their meaning remained mysterious, but their craftsmanship was undeniable. The sound of approaching horses brought her attention sharply back to the present. She quickly secured the gifts inside her dress pocket and stepped back onto the porch. From the eastern approach came riders, not Apache warriors as she'd half expected, but a military patrol led by Colonel Fletcher himself. Catherine steeled herself for another confrontation as Fletcher dismounted, followed by 6 soldiers who immediately took defensive positions around her homestead. The colonel's expression was grim as he approached. "Mrs. Wells," he greeted her curtly. "I assume you know why I'm here." "I can make an educated guess," she replied evenly. "Something about Swift Fox's 3-day promise." Fletcher nodded, his gaze sweeping the property with professional assessment. "Any sign of Apache activity?" Catherine considered the gifts hidden in her pocket. Truth warred with caution. Acknowledging Apache visitors might escalate an already tense situation, yet lying to a military officer carried its own risks. "None," she answered finally, choosing technical truth. She'd seen no Apache, only evidence of their passing. The colonel seemed unsatisfied with her response. "My scouts report unusual movement north of here last night. A large party crossing, the bridge then disappearing into the draws. They're out there, Mrs. Wells, whether you've seen them or not. If they wanted to attack, they'd hardly announce their intentions 3 days in advance," Catherine pointed out reasonably. "Unless that was precisely their strategy," Fletcher countered. "Create expectation, then strike elsewhere while we're focused here." The possibility hadn't occurred to Catherine, though it made a certain tactical sense. "Have there been attacks elsewhere?" "Not yet," Fletcher admitted. "But the day is young." He gestured to his men, who began establishing a defensive perimeter around her cabin, clearly settling in for the day. Catherine watched with growing concern. If Swift Fox's people did appear as promised, they'd encounter a military force primed for confrontation. "Colonel," she began cautiously, "if Apache do approach under white flag, surely military protocol—" "Protocol be damned," Fletcher interrupted harshly. 4 families at Jefferson Creek, 2 passengers on the stagecoach, a rancher and his son, were found yesterday with arrows in their backs. The time for parley is over." Catherine absorbed this new information with dismay. More killings, more fuel added to the cycle of violence and retribution. "Black Knife's work?" she asked quietly. "Does it matter?" Fletcher's expression hardened further. "To the dead, one Apache band is much like another." "It matters to those seeking peace," Catherine insisted. "Swift Fox provided information to help capture Black Knife. His grandsons confirmed that information. They're working against the hostiles, not with them." Fletcher studied her with something between pity and contempt. "You've been thoroughly taken in, haven't you? The wise old medicine man, the honorable grandsons, all helping the nice white doctor while their warriors prepare another massacre. That's... Mrs. Wells," he cut her off again. "I'm not here to debate Apache politics with you. I'm here to protect American citizens from hostile Indians. You do well to remember which category you belong in." The conversation was interrupted by a soldier calling from the ridgeline. "Colonel, riders approaching from the north." Fletcher immediately moved to verify, field glasses raised toward the indicated direction. Catherine followed, heart pounding, with conflicting emotions. Hope that Swift Fox had kept his promise. Fear of what might happen when he encountered Fletcher's troops. Through a gap in the trees, she could make out movement. Riders approaching steadily, though still too distant to count or identify clearly. Fletcher's posture stiffened as he continued. His assessment, at least 30 riders, he reported grimly. More behind them, moving in formation. He turned to his sergeant. "Battle positions. Prepare to engage when they reach the creek crossing." "Colonel, wait," Catherine protested. "Let me look first. It might be Swift Fox's people coming peacefully." Fletcher hesitated, then handed her the field glasses with obvious reluctance. "See for yourself." Catherine focused the lenses, adjusting for distance. What she saw made her breath catch. Approaching in a disciplined line were Apache riders, perhaps 40, visible with more behind them. But what struck her most was their appearance. These were not warriors painted for battle. They wore their finest clothing, silver and beadwork, in catching the morning light, and at their head rode 3 familiar figures. Swift Fox, centered and obviously recovered from his injury, flanked by wolf caller and running deer. Most remarkably, behind this vanguard came pack horses laden with what appeared to be bundles of hides, baskets, and other goods. This was no war party. It was a trading expedition, elaborate and formal. "It's Swift Fox," she confirmed, lowering the glasses. "And he's brought a trading party, not warriors. Look at the pack horses, the ceremonial dress. This is commerce, not conflict." Fletcher reclaimed the glasses, verifying her assessment with obvious surprise. "I'll be damned," he muttered. "A trading party after everything that's happened." "Perhaps because of everything that's happened," Catherine suggested. "A demonstration that not all Apaches seek violence, that cooperation remains possible." The colonel's tactical mind worked visibly, reassessing the situation. It could be a diversion, a cover for attack elsewhere. Or it could be exactly what it appears, Catherine countered. An elder keeping his promise, bringing his people to trade in peace when almost everyone, including you, expected war. Fletcher barked orders to his men, adjusting their positions but not standing down entirely. "We'll meet them at the creek. Boundary, under the flag of truce, but weapons ready." He turned to Catherine. "You'll come with us. If this is truly Swift Fox keeping his word, your presence may help keep matters civil." The meeting took place where the small creek crossed Catherine's property boundary. Fletcher positioned his men strategically, presenting military discipline, while avoiding the appearance of imminent attack. Catherine stood slightly apart, medical bag in hand, her own statement of purpose and identity. Swift Fox halted his riders at a respectful distance, then proceeded forward with his grandsons, and two elders Catherine hadn't met before. The transformation in the old man was remarkable. No sign remained of the starving, injured traveler who had appeared at her door during the storm. He sat straight on his horse, the quiet authority she had glimpsed earlier now fully evident. "Colonel Fletcher," Swift Fox greeted him formally. "Catherine Wells, we come as promised, 3 days from parting." Fletcher remained visibly wary, despite the peaceful approach. "You bring many riders, Swift Fox. Hard to view this as anything but intimidation." "We bring many traders," the old man corrected calmly, "with goods to exchange, a gesture of peace. Between peoples who have seen too much blood spilled." Wolfcollar moved his horse forward slightly. "My grandfather suggested this after his return. Many were skeptical, but the medicine woman's kindness deserved acknowledgement in our way." "Medicine woman?" Fletcher repeated, glancing at Catherine with new understanding. "You mean Mrs. Wells?" "She earned the title," Swift Fox affirmed, "by seeing a person where others would see only Apache, by risking her standing among her own people for what she knew was right." Catherine felt the weight of this unexpected honor. Among frontier settlers, being designated medicine woman by Apache would be viewed with suspicion at best, condemnation at worst. Yet she recognized the profound respect it conveyed from Swift Fox's perspective. Colonel Fletcher seemed to struggle with the unprecedented situation. His military training provided no clear protocol for Apache elders arriving with trading parties rather than war parties. "Recent attacks make any large Apache gathering suspect," he stated finally, though with less conviction than before, regardless of stated purpose. "The attacks were Black Knife's doing," Swift Fox replied patiently. "Using information I provided." "Did your soldiers find his camp in the Dragoons?" Fletcher hesitated before answering. "They found evidence of recent occupation. Firing still warm, but the band had moved on. Because Apache scouts watch army movements," Wolfcaller explained. "Information flows both ways in this territory." Running Deer spoke next, his voice carrying formal authority. "We bring more than trade goods, Colonel. We bring information. Black Knife moves his band toward the Chiricahua Mountains. They travel with stolen army horses and weapons taken from the stagecoach. We can provide details of their route, the passes they will use." Fletcher's interest sharpened visibly at this intelligence offer. Why would you help capture other Apache? Because Black Knife's actions threaten all Apache, Swift Fox answered. His violence feeds your violence. The cycle must be broken for any peace to grow. Catherine watched as the colonel processed this, the military pragmatist weighing tactical advantage against ingrained suspicion. Finally, he nodded. I'll hear your information, he decided, but the trading will need territorial approval. I don't have authority to permit unregulated commerce with non-reservation Indians. Swift Fox seemed to have anticipated this response. We bring gifts for Catherine Wells that require no approval. Trading with others can wait for proper permissions. He gestured, and from the main party, 2 riders approached, leading a magnificent Pinto mare, sleek, muscular, and adorned with a finely crafted bridle inlaid with silver conchos. Behind them came another Apache, leading a pack horse laden with bulging saddlebags. Catherine stared in astonishment as Wolfcaller dismounted to hold the mare's reins. For the medicine woman, he announced formally, a horse worthy of one who rides between worlds, and medicines from our healers to complement your own, gathered from places your people rarely travel. Running Deer added, the silver is from our finest craftsmen, not payment for your kindness, for kindness cannot be purchased, but acknowledgement of respect between healers. Catherine looked to Colonel Fletcher, uncertain how to respond to such elaborate gifts. The mare alone represented significant value on the frontier, where good horses often meant the difference between life and death. The colonel's expression had shifted from suspicion to something more complex, a reluctant reassessment of assumptions, made concrete in the form of valuable gifts freely offered. It would be an insult to refuse, Mrs. Wells, he said finally, though I'll need to document this exchange in my report. Catherine stepped forward, running a gentle hand along the mare's neck. The animal nickered softly, apparently already comfortable, with human touch. She's beautiful, Catherine said sincerely, but I can't accept such valuable gifts simply for doing what any doctor would do. Swift Fox's weathered face creased in what might have been amusement. Not any doctor would have opened their door to an Apache during a storm. Not any doctor would have defended that choice against soldiers and settlers alike. He gestured to the waiting gifts. These come not just from me, but from my people. A bond has been created, Catherine Wells. These gifts acknowledge that bond. As Fletcher conferred with Swift Fox and his grandsons about Black Knife's movements, Catherine examined the medicinal supplies with professional interest. The Apache healers had included plants she recognized from her own pharmacopoeia, alongside others she'd never encountered, each carefully prepared and labeled in their own fashion. This exchange represented something far more significant than mere gratitude. It was recognition across cultural boundaries, healer to healer, knowledge to knowledge. The silver jewelry and magnificent horse were statements visible to all, public declarations that Catherine Wells stood under Apache protection. In the territory's complex politics, such protection carried double significance. It would mark her further in the eyes of some settlers, yet provide security against threats like those implied by the Reeves brothers' warning. As the formal exchange concluded and arrangements were made for territorial officials to review the larger trading proposal, Catherine found herself standing with Swift Fox away from the others. The old man's dark eyes studied her with quiet intensity. "The silver medallion protected you?" he asked. Catherine touched it reflexively where it hung beneath her collar. "No one has attacked me, if that's what you mean." "It means more than simple protection from physical harm," Swift Fox explained. "It connects you to our ways, our seeing. The gifts left in the night, you found them." "Yes," she admitted, no longer surprised by his knowledge of things she'd told no one. "They're beautiful. But how did your people get past the army patrols?" Swift Fox smiled slightly. "Some paths remain, known only to those who have walked this land for generations. His expression grew more serious. The silver band is especially significant. Among my people, only those recognized as medicine people wear such symbols. Catherine felt the weight of this designation. I'm not sure I've earned such recognition. I'm just a doctor trying to honor my oath. Such oaths matter, Swift Fox affirmed. They bind us to purposes greater than ourselves. He gestured toward the magnificent horse. The mare's name translates to one who crosses boundaries. She is especially suited to you, Catherine Wells. The symbolism wasn't lost on her. In treating Swift Fox, in standing her ground against threats and suspicion, she had indeed crossed boundaries few frontier settlers dared approach. What happens now? She asked, watching as Fletcher organized his men to escort the Apache trading party toward Jefferson Creek, where territorial officials could be summoned. Now, the difficult work begins, Swift Fox replied. Building trust requires more than single acts of kindness or courage. It requires sustained effort against the currents of history and hatred. He touched her arm briefly. But seeds have been planted here. Whether they grow depends on many factors, but they have been planted nonetheless. As Swift Fox rejoined, his grandsons and the unusual procession prepared to depart, Catherine stood beside her new mare, the silver gifts secured in her medical bag, aware that her life had been irrevocably transformed. The territorial marshal had warned her about choosing sides, about community expectations and loyalty. What neither he nor the Reeves brothers had understood was that Catherine hadn't chosen sides in the traditional sense. She'd chosen healing over harm, compassion over fear, and in doing so, she'd become something new on the frontier, not quite a settler, not quite accepted by the Apache, but something in between. A medicine woman who crossed boundaries, the magnificent Pinto mare, nickered softly, as if in agreement with her unspoken thoughts. Together they watched as Swift Fox led his people toward what might become a new chapter in the territory's troubled history, or might simply become another footnote in its long chronicle of misunderstanding and conflict. Either way, Catherine Wells would continue doing what she had always done, healing whoever came to her door, regardless of origin or allegiance. The only difference was that now, with a silver medallion around her neck and a spectacular mare at her side, those who might wish her harm would think twice before acting on their threats. As Colonel Fletcher had observed with grudging respect, she had earned recognition from the Apache on their own terms. In a territory where such recognition often meant the difference between life and death, Catherine had secured something many would consider impossible: the respect of both worlds. However tentative and fragile that respect might prove, 2 months had transformed Catherine's modest homestead. The small garden had expanded considerably, now featuring both familiar vegetables and medicinal plants gathered from Apache trading expeditions. The crude lean-to beside her cabin had been replaced with a proper stable to house her magnificent Pinto mare, now named Boundary, in acknowledgement of Swift Fox's explanation, and the 2 pack horses she'd acquired for transporting medical supplies to outlying settlements. Most significantly, the cabin itself had gained an addition, a covered workspace where patients could be examined before entering her home. Above its entrance hung a simple wooden sign, Catherine Wells, physician, with the same words repeated in Apache symbols beneath, the translation provided by Running Deer during his last visit. This morning found Catherine grinding herbs in a stone mortar, a gift from the Apache medicine woman who had begun sharing knowledge with her. The mixture of traditional frontier medicine and Apache healing practices had proven remarkably effective, particularly for infections and fever reduction. She'd started documenting these combinations in a leather-bound journal, creating a pharmacopoeia, uniquely suited to territorial conditions. The sound of approaching horses drew her attention. Catherine moved to the door, recognition bringing a smile to her face as she spotted familiar riders. Lieutenant Harmon, accompanied by a young Apache man she knew as Eagle's Voice, one of Running Deer's cousins. The unlikely pairing still struck her as remarkable, though such sights had become less unusual in recent weeks. "Morning, Mrs. Wells," Harmon called, dismounting with the ease of a career cavalryman. "Brought you a patient. Private from Fort Whipple, with a persistent fever the post surgeon can't seem to address." Catherine nodded, noting the soldier slumped in his saddle behind Harmon, face flushed with obvious illness. "Bring him in. I'll examine him immediately." As Harmon helped the sick man dismount, Eagle's voice approached with the formal dignity that characterized many of Swift Fox's people. "Medicine woman," he greeted her respectfully in accented English. "My grandfather sends word that Black Knife's warriors have been seen near Canyon Creek. He suggests caution for those traveling the eastern trails." "Thank you for the warning," Catherine replied. "I'll spread word to the settlements." She gestured toward her garden. "I've been growing the fever weed your healers recommended. Would you like to take some back to your people?" The young Apache nodded, pleased. "Our medicine woman will be grateful. The summer storms washed away much of our usual gathering grounds." This exchange of information and medicines had become routine, a small but significant bridge between communities, historically divided by fear and misunderstanding. While territorial officials conducted formal negotiations with Swift Fox's band regarding trade and hunting rights, these person-to-person connections created a foundation of practical cooperation. Catherine turned her attention to the feverish soldier, guiding him to her examination area. "How long has he been ill?" she asked Harmon as she began her assessment. 3 days, the lieutenant replied. "Started with chills, then the fever set in. Post-surgeon tried quinine and bloodletting. Without improvement." Catherine suppressed her opinion of bloodletting, a practice she'd abandoned years ago after seeing its dubious results. Instead, she checked the soldier's pulse, examined his eyes and throat, and felt the glands at his neck. "No signs of malaria," she observed. "More likely typhoid or mountain fever." She selected several bottles from her expanded medicine shelf, including tinctures made from Apache herbal combinations. "He needs complete rest, plenty of clean water, and these medicines administered every 4 hours." Harmon watched her work with evident respect. "Colonel Fletcher suggested bringing him to you directly, said you've had better results with these frontier fevers than the post-surgeons." The acknowledgement from Fletcher, previously among her most skeptical critics, reflected the gradual shift in her standing. Catherine had proven herself not by argument, but by consistent results, treating soldiers and settlers with the same dedication she showed to Mexican laborers or Apache visitors. "How are things at the fort?" she asked, preparing a first dose of medicine for the soldier. Harmon's expression suggested complex developments. "Territorial governor arrived yesterday. There's talk of formal treaties with certain Apache bands, Swift Fox's people among them. Limited hunting rights, regulated trade, possibly even medical exchanges." Medical exchanges. Catherine's interest sharpened. "Your influence," Harmon explained. "Fletcher reported on your combined approach, Western medicine supplemented with Apache treatments. The Army Medical Corps is cautiously interested, especially given your documented success rates." As they discussed these developments, Eagle's voice returned with the fever weed, carefully wrapped in damp cloth for transportation. Catherine provided additional medicines for the soldier, with clear instructions for their administration. "Lieutenant," she said, as they prepared to leave, "would you inform Colonel Fletcher that I'm willing to document my treatment methods formally if the Medical Corps is genuinely interested, but only with proper acknowledgement of Apache contributions. I won't have their knowledge exploited without recognition." Harmon nodded, understanding the principle at stake. "I'll convey your terms exactly. For what it's worth, Fletcher anticipated your position, said you'd stand your ground as always." After they departed, Harmon and the sick soldier toward Fort Whipple, Eagle's voice toward his people's current hunting grounds, Catherine returned to her herb grinding with renewed purpose. The possibility of formal medical exchange represented something she'd barely dared hope for: institutional recognition that healing traditions from both cultures had value. The silver medallion running deer had given her months ago remained around her neck, now joined by the intricate silver band that marked her as a recognized healer among the Apache. She wore both openly, no longer concerned about territorial gossip or settler disapproval. Her results spoke for themselves, drawing patients from settlements throughout the region, including some who had once condemned her Apache sympathies. As midday approached, Catherine had just finished preparing medicines when she spotted 3 riders approaching from the direction of Jefferson Creek. Recognition brought a grimace to her face. The Reeves brothers, still a persistent threat, despite changed circumstances. In the months since Swift Fox's trading party had changed territorial dynamics, the brothers had maintained their hostility, though they'd been forced to express it more cautiously. Word had spread quickly about Catherine's new status. The frontier doctor who had earned Apache protection, whose homestead was now regularly visited by both military officials and tribal representatives. She met them at the edge of her property, hand resting casually near the revolver she now wore openly on her hip, a gift from Lieutenant Harmon after the threatening cloth drawing had been found in her cabin. "Mrs. Wells," Jeremiah called, his false cordiality even thinner than usual. "Heard you're treating soldiers now with Indian hocus-pocus." "I treat patients with whatever works, Mr. Reeves," Catherine replied evenly. "State your business." Ezekiel spat into the dust. "Our business is warning decent folk about what's happening. Territory's getting soft on hostiles because of people. Like you." "Hostiles?" Catherine raised an eyebrow. "You mean the Apache who've helped track Black Knife's raiders? Who've provided intelligence that saved settler lives? Those hostiles?" Matthew, the youngest brother, leaned forward in his saddle. "Don't matter what good deeds some of them do. Indians are Indians. Territory was better when everyone understood that." Catherine studied the brothers with clinical detachment. Their hatred seemed almost pathological in its resistance to evidence or reason. Even as tentative cooperation between Swift Fox's band and territorial authorities had reduced attacks on settlements, the Reeves brothers remained fixated on their narrative of universal Apache treachery. "The world is changing, gentlemen," she observed. "Those who adapt will prosper. Those who cling to outdated hatreds will find themselves increasingly isolated." Jeremiah's face darkened. "Fancy words from a woman who sleeps under Apache protection." He nodded toward her silver medallion, wearing their trinkets, speaking their language, treating them like equals. "Some folks are wondering where your true loyalties lie." "My loyalty is to healing," Catherine replied, the response now practiced through repetition. "To reducing suffering, regardless of who experiences it." "There's talk in Jefferson Creek," Ezekiel continued ominously, "about organizing proper settlements, ones with clear rules about who belongs and who doesn't." The implied threat wasn't subtle. Despite changing territorial policies, many settlers remained hostile to any accommodation with native peoples. Communities were forming around these hardline positions, potentially creating new flashpoints for conflict. "Is that why you're here?" Catherine asked directly. "To deliver another threat?" Jeremiah straightened in his saddle, dropping any pretense of civility. "Consider it friendly advice. Things are coming to a head, Mrs. Wells. Governor can sign whatever treaties he wants, but real Americans know Indians only understand strength. When the time comes, folks will remember who stood with civilization and who stood with savages." As if in response to his words, dust rose on the northern horizon, riders approaching at a steady pace. Even at this distance, Catherine recognized the disciplined formation of an Apache party. The Reeves brothers spotted it too, hands moving instinctively toward their weapons. "Expecting company?" Jeremiah asked, suspicion hardening his voice. "I don't track Apache movements," Catherine replied calmly. though she suspected this might be Wolf Caller's scheduled visit to exchange medical information. But whoever they are, they're welcome at my homestead, unlike those who bring threats and intimidation. The approaching riders resolved into clear view. 6 Apache warriors in formal attire, led by Wolf Caller himself. They rode with the confidence of men who knew their rights and boundaries under recent territorial agreements. "Time for you gentlemen to leave," Catherine told the Reeves brothers firmly. "I have legitimate business to conduct." Jeremiah's expression suggested he might argue, but even their bravado had limits when confronted with armed Apache approaching under official sanction. The brothers retreated with obvious reluctance, casting dark glances toward the incoming riders. "This isn't over," Jeremiah called back as they departed. "Not by a long shot." Catherine watched them go with troubled thoughts. The Reeves brothers represented a persistent undercurrent of resistance to the fragile progress being established. Their threats carried weight beyond mere words. They embodied an ideology that had deep roots throughout the territory. Wolf Caller arrived shortly, after the brothers disappeared from view, dismounting with the fluid grace that characterized his movements. Though formally dressed for official business, he carried his rifle prominently, a reminder that peace remained conditional. "The Reeves brothers," he observed, having clearly recognized the departing riders. "They continue to threaten the medicine." "Woman," Catherine nodded, welcoming him with the traditional Apache gesture Swift Fox had taught her. "Some men can't accept change, even when it benefits everyone." Wolf Caller's expression remained serious. "My grandfather sends warning. Black Knife's warriors have joined with others who reject the new agreements. They speak against peace, against cooperation with white authorities. The Reeves brothers do the same among your people." The parallel wasn't lost on Catherine. Extremists existed in both societies, feeding each other's narratives, justifying escalation through the other's actions. "Do you think they're coordinating?" she asked, the possibility troubling. "Not directly," Wolf Caller replied, "but they serve each other's purposes. Black Knife's raids give men like the Reeves brothers an excuse to demand harsher measures against all Apache. The Reeves brothers' threats convince some young warriors that peace is impossible." Catherine led him toward her cabin, where she had prepared coffee in anticipation of visitors. "Your grandfather believes the treaties will hold despite these pressures." Wolf Caller accepted the offered cup with formal thanks before answering. "Swift Fox has lived long enough to see many agreements made and broken. He believes this time may be different because of people like you, Catherine Wells." "Me?" She looked up in surprise. "Those who stand at crossroads," he explained, using an Apache metaphor she'd come to understand through their cultural exchanges. "People who can walk in multiple worlds, who create connections where others see only barriers." Wolf Caller reached into his possessions and produced a carefully wrapped package. "My grandfather sends this for your medical records. The symbols and preparation methods for 50 healing plants, translated into your language by Running Deer." Catherine accepted the gift with profound appreciation, recognizing its significance. Swift Fox was entrusting generations of medicinal knowledge to her safekeeping, knowledge traditionally guarded closely within Apache culture. "This is an extraordinary honor," she said, examining the meticulously prepared documents. "Please convey my deepest gratitude to your grandfather. He says knowledge kept isolated withers," Wolf Caller replied, "like people kept apart. The future requires new growth, new combinations." As they discussed exchanging medical practices, Catherine, sharing her documentation of treatment results, while Wolf Caller provided insights into traditional healing ceremonies that complemented the physical medicines. She reflected on how dramatically her life had transformed in the months since a wounded Apache elder had appeared at her door during a dust storm. What had begun as a simple act of medical duty had expanded into something far more significant, a small but important bridge between communities with centuries of mistrust between them. Her homestead had become a neutral territory where different healing traditions could be shared, where soldiers and Apache could meet without immediate hostility, where the rigid boundaries of frontier society became permeable. After Wolf Caller departed with medicines and documented treatments to share with his people's healers, Catherine stood in her doorway, watching the horizon. The territory stretched vast and unforgiving in all directions, its red rock formations and sagebrush plains, indifferent to human conflicts, played across their ancient surfaces. The future remained uncertain. Black Knife's raiders continued to strike settlements, undermining fragile progress toward peace. Men like the Reeves brothers continued promoting narratives of inevitable conflict between civilization and savagery. Territorial policies shifted with political winds from Washington, creating unpredictable conditions on the ground. Yet something fundamental had changed, at least in her corner of this contested land. Seeds of understanding had been planted, taking root despite harsh conditions. Catherine touched the silver medallion at her neck, its weight now familiar and comforting, a physical reminder of connections that transcended arbitrary boundaries. Her thoughts were interrupted by the approach of a wagon from Jefferson Creek. An anxious-looking man drove a team of horses at dangerous speed, a woman beside him cradling something in her arms. Catherine recognized the signs of medical emergency immediately. "Dr. Wells!" the man called as they drew closer. "Our daughter! The fever took her sudden. Jefferson Creek folks said you're the only one who might help." Catherine moved quickly to meet them, medical instincts overriding all other concerns. The child in the woman's arms couldn't have been more than 4 years old, her small face flushed with dangerous fever, breathing shallow and rapid. "Bring her inside," Catherine directed, already mentally cataloguing potential treatments, including the Apache fever remedies that had proven so effective. When did the symptoms begin? As the couple hurriedly explained their daughter's condition, Catherine prepared her examination area. The fear in their eyes transcended all other considerations: political sympathies, cultural prejudices, territorial disputes. In this moment, they were simply parents desperate to save their child. "I'll do everything possible," Catherine assured them, accepting the precious burden into her arms. The child's fever burned against her skin as she carried her to the examination table. Looking down at the sick girl, Catherine Wells understood with perfect clarity what Swift Fox had been trying to tell her all along. Healing wasn't just about medicine. It was about seeing beyond imposed categories to the shared humanity beneath. Each life treated, each suffering eased, created the possibility for connection where division had prevailed. She turned to her expanded medicine shelf, selecting both traditional remedies and Apache treatments, combining them with the confidence born from documented results rather than rigid adherence to either tradition. "Your daughter is in good hands," she told the worried parents. "We have options that weren't available even months ago." As Catherine began her work, the work she had been trained for, the purpose that had driven her west after losing Thomas, the calling that had sustained her through isolation and hardship, she felt a sense of rightness settle over her. This was why she had opened her door during that fateful dust storm, why she had defied convention and expectation to treat an elderly Apache when others would have turned him away. Outside her window, the magnificent pinto mare grazed peacefully. In the corral, Swift Fox's people had helped construct. On her shelves, medicine bottles contained healing knowledge from multiple traditions, their value proven through practical application rather than cultural origin. Around her neck, silver from Apache craftsmen signified respect and protection that crossed boundaries others considered impermeable. Catherine Wells, frontier doctor turned medicine woman, continued the patient, determined work of healing, not just bodies, but the deeper wounds that divided peoples and lands. Each treated patient, each exchanged medicine, each moment of connection created possibility where only conflict had existed before. And somewhere to the north, in a camp where Apache elders discussed the uncertain future facing their people, Swift Fox, who speaks with thunder, told again the story of a frontier doctor who had chosen compassion over fear, healing over division, possibility over resignation. The story spread, changing slightly with each telling but maintaining its essential truth, that sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply seeing the humanity in those we've been taught to fear. In her cabin-turned-clinic, Catherine prepared medicine for the feverish child, her movements sure and her purpose clear. The silver medallion caught the afternoon light as she worked, a glinting reminder that boundaries exist primarily in the human mind, and that those with courage enough can always find ways to cross them. Outside, the Arizona Territory continued, its tumultuous evolution, shaped by forces both destructive and creative. Treaties would be made and broken, violence would flare and subside, political winds would shift direction with predictable unpredictability. But in this small corner of the vast landscape, something new had taken root, something that began with an injured traveler, a dust storm, and a door opened when convention demanded it remain closed. Catherine applied the cooling herbs to the child's forehead, speaking softly to reassure the worried parents. This was her contribution to the territory's future, not grand policies or dramatic confrontations, but the steady, persistent work of healing whoever came to her door, creating through example a vision of what could be rather than what had always been. As the child's fever began to respond to treatment, Catherine caught sight of her reflection in the small mirror hanging near her medicine shelf. The woman who looked back at her was not the same one who had fled Boston 6 years, earlier grief-stricken and seeking escape. This woman's eyes held confidence, born from tested principles, strength forged through lonely stands against prevailing winds, and wisdom acquired through openness to unfamiliar knowledge. She had become, in Swift Fox's words, one who stands at crossroads, not fully belonging to either world, but creating connection between them through practical daily choices that prioritized healing over division. It wasn't an easy position to maintain, as the Reeves brothers' ongoing threats reminded her, but it was a necessary one if the cycle of violence and retribution was ever to be broken. The child stirred, her breathing easier as the combined medicines took effect. Her parents exhaled in tentative relief, faces showing the universal expression of hope restored that Catherine had witnessed countless times across cultural boundaries. "She's responding well," Catherine told them, medical confidence evident in her voice. "The fever's breaking already." As she continued her work well into the evening, Catherine's thoughts returned to Swift Fox's parting words during his last visit to her homestead. "Healing comes in many forms, Catherine Wells, some visible, some hidden, but all necessary for the wounded territory we share." Outside her window, stars appeared one by one in the vast Arizona sky. The same stars that had witnessed centuries of human struggle across these contested lands, the same stars that would watch whatever future unfolded from these fragile beginnings of understanding. Catherine Wells, medicine woman, continued her patient work beneath their ancient light, adding her small but essential contribution to that unwritten future. One healed body, one shared medicine, one open door at a time. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.